Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live today from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Ian is here today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
So I do have a programming note I want to pass along. You know, today, I think a lot of people would expect this would be the kickoff, the return of our Tuesdays with Barry Trotz. Of course, every 5 o'clock or every Tuesday at 5 o'clock, Barry Trotz usually joins us on the program. But because the Predators opener is Thursday night, we'll be live from Bridgestone Arena ahead of Preds and Stars. Barry will join us at 5 o'clock on Thursday, and then Barry will join us every subsequent Tuesday throughout the rest of the season. So today, if you tune in at 5 o'clock, Tuesdays with Barry is not gone. It will be back. Very popular last year, but it will be on Thursday ahead of the season opener. So we start with this. The bye week is over. The Titans now play every single week the rest of the year. Sunday, noon, CBS. I think there's one game against the Chargers in there that's a late kickoff. Everything else, noon, CBS. No Monday, no Thursday, no Tom Brady game on Fox, no Tony Romo game on CBS. No. Spiro Ditas and Adam Archuleta are calling the game this week against Indianapolis. And guys, get used to it. There's going to be a lot of Spiro and Adam on your TV set this year. Just be glad you're not getting the Tom McCarthy game or the Beth Mowins game, or you know what I mean. So let me ask everybody this question. Now, again, my opinion doesn't matter on this. Your opinion doesn't matter on this. Ian's opinion doesn't matter on this. I don't know whose opinion. Amy's opinion, I guess, matters, but she'll never tell us what she thinks. So what is the goal for the rest of the season? I told you all before, when it comes to September football, that September football is weird. I'm like, guys, weird things happen in September. This is before good teams know for sure that they're good. This is before bad teams know that they're bad. This is where new quarterbacks and coordinators are kind of getting assimilated. So you're going to see some weird things that happen in September. But it's not September anymore. It's October. And as far as the AFC is concerned, we know Kansas City, Houston, Baltimore, Buffalo. We know they're the contenders. Pittsburgh is currently 3-2, though I guess they're mulling a quarterback change there. Denver is 3-2, surprise, surprise, and the Chargers are 2-2. Right now, that's the AFC playoff picture. The Jets, who just fired their coach, which, by the way, Ian, did I not call for that yesterday on the program?
Something had to change, I think, was mentioned.
I said you got to fire Robert Saleh. You know, you can't switch the quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback of the Jets. You can't switch the quarterback. Yeah, I mean, you had to do something in order to try to salvage this season because they're all in this year. That was fire the coach. They fired the coach. Normally, the Jets do crazy things. I don't have a problem with this one. But the Jets right now are right on the outside looking in at 2-3. Man, that game was winnable too for the Titans. The playoffs, as bad as this team has played at times, is not totally out of the question if you get hot. And considering that we've seen the 2006 Titans start the season off terribly and then go on a heater and fall one game short of the playoffs, I'm not saying this team can't get hot either. The Titans still technically have the number one defense in the NFL, and while they don't get any turnovers, it is a playoff caliber defense. I'm not sure it's a Super Bowl caliber defense, and I'm not sure it's what I call a carry you defense, where you can go run, punt, and just put the defense back on the field. The 2000 Ravens, I don't think it's that good, but it is good. Good enough to make the playoffs. Which leads me to this. How important to you all are the playoffs this year? If you win on Sunday, as crazy as it sounds, at 2-3, the Tennessee Titans would be legit in the playoff race. They'd have 2 wins over AFC teams. They'd win their first divisional game. And again, the Jets are the first team out, and they're 2-3. If the Jets lose on Monday night to the Bills, you're ahead of the Jets. And yet at the same time, while asking you all the question about how you feel about the playoffs, the idea of the playoffs doesn't excite me really at all. And there's a couple of reasons. Number one, it's highly improbable the Titans are going to be anything but 2-5 at best after they play Buffalo and Detroit. Again, they can beat Indy on Sunday. I don't think they will. Well, maybe we'll wait till Friday to make that prediction. But they can beat Indy on Sunday, but they're not going to beat Buffalo and they're not going to beat Detroit. And I think we have to be honest about that. And two, Will Levis up to this point has given me zero faith that even if this team were to find a way into the playoffs, short of him just handing the ball off, or that he could do anything. Like, again, we're sitting here talking about, can they make the playoffs? And it's like, can the quarterback go an entire quarter without turning the football over? And we don't know. And three, the offensive line is a total mess. So we can talk playoffs. If people want to talk about the Titans' ability to get into the playoffs, we can talk it. Because, again, as crazy as it sounds, they're not that far out of a playoff spot. In fact, I looked today, NFL.com has their, percent chance of making the playoffs. And the Jets, again, who just fired their coach, the Jets have a 60-something% chance of making the playoffs. The Titans have a 20% chance, according to NFL.com. And I don't know exactly where they come up with this, probably through like the opponent's strength of schedule and what their records are and things like that. The Titans have a 20% chance of making the playoffs. And I remember in 2017, and really 2016, the year before, when I was like, please make the playoffs, because the Titans hadn't made the playoffs for 10 years. And I think there were some people that were saying, so how big of a deal are the playoffs? And I'm like, it's the playoffs. And the Titans haven't been to the playoffs in forever. And the Titans haven't mattered in forever. And the Titans haven't. And I don't feel that way this year about the playoffs. I don't know if some of that is because we now allow 7 teams in instead of 6. And I don't know if that's because the Titans have been to the playoffs recently. And so the thirst to get in there and to get walloped by Houston in the first game just doesn't really exist for me. But again, the question that I'm asking is for you and for Amy and the people that matter. So what's the whole point of the rest of this Titan season? Is it to tank so that hopefully you can draft next year's Jaden Daniels? Is it to see if there's just any juice that they can squeeze at all out of Will Levis? Or is it we're going to try to win as many games as possible because this is football, and no matter what you do, you try to win. You play to win the game. Is that what the rest of the season's about? What do you want out of the rest of this season? And this is where I'm kind of at a loss because I don't really know. I mean, I'm a pretty strong anti-tanker. I don't like the idea of losing games on purpose. I don't like the idea of celebrating losses. And, again, the other part that comes with tanking is who's the star quarterback that's out there for you to draft this year if you, in fact, end up with the number 1 overall pick. I don't like it. But at least if you tank, there's something to look forward to on the other side of the tunnel. Maybe. If you try to win as many games as possible to make the playoffs, you're going to end up with 6 wins. You're going to pick 8th. You're not going to sniff the playoffs. And I'm not sure any of us really want that. Like, is that a step in the right direction? If you're trying to see whether or not there is anything, any chance the young quarterback can be successful, I'm here to tell you right now that's probably no. I mean, I guess we can wade our way through it, but that's kind of more your business than it is mine. I've kind of made up my mind there. So I guess I'm a little down in the dumps looking for meaning in the second half. And we're not even to the halfway point, but the post-bye. of the 2024 Tennessee Titans season. What is the point of the rest of this year? Is it to win? Is it to make the playoffs? Is it to try to become a contender? Is it to try to get Will Levis to be a franchise quarterback? He's not going to be one, but we can ask. What's it about? Is it about tanking for Shedeur Sanders or Jalen Milroe or Cam Ward? Because I don't really know the answer. 615-737-1025. That's where we're starting. 615-737-1025. There's one thing that I've started to hear from the boo-hoo crowd. The boo-hoo crowd that thought that the Titans were going to win 10 games this year, thought the Titans were going to make the playoffs this year, thought the Titans were going to be good this year. And now they've changed their tune a little bit. But they haven't changed their tune to admit reality. The Let Rand Cook crew has not turned into the, man, maybe they should have gotten a right tackle crew. But they've changed into something else. And I'm not sure that that's what the Titans actually thought. They may end up trying to sell it, but I'm not sure that's what the Titans thought they were doing coming into the season. We'll get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. And again, I asked you a question about what do you want out of this team, so we will get to your phone. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
do you find in scoreboard watching or talking about the standings with the team this early in the season, especially with this first division game? Does that matter, or is that?
Yeah, I think it matters. We put those things up. We're aware of it. For us, especially, you sort of take a quarterly look. Every 4 games or so on where things stand, and our focus when the week starts is very narrow. We're trying to win this week. It's a week-to-week league, so what you did last week doesn't mean you're going to be able to repeat it this week, and all those things change. However, there is a 30,000-foot view that I think helps guys put it in perspective. That, we're our record is what it is. We're 1-3, but you got a chance to quickly get back in the mix if you can win a divisional game this week. You see most of the league outside of about 3 teams is either 3-2 or 2-3 or 2-2. So it's all jumbled up. You focus so much on your own team and your own process that every now and again, though, it does help to get some perspective of what happens around the league and where teams stand and where your division stands and where the AFC stands, and just to show that there's, it's pretty wide open still at this point, and a lot of things can go a lot of different directions at this juncture in the season. But yeah, I think you always have an awareness of what is happening, particularly in your division and certainly in the conference.
That was Brian Callahan yesterday saying, no, we're keeping an eye on the playoffs. We're keeping an eye on the playoffs. We're keeping an eye on what may be this year. Hey, most everybody's jumbled in there except for a couple of teams. By the way, if you lose this week to Indy, you're part of the couple of teams. If you beat Indy, then you're jumbled in there with everybody else. I haven't really watched the Denver Broncos, but I can't imagine that the Denver Broncos are that much better than you, right? They can't be that much better than you. But I said the Let Rand Cook crew has kind of changed their tune a little bit. Coming into the year, they were like, Jared, look at what we've done this offseason. You're a hater. Because I continued to mention the fact that the Titans didn't have a right tackle. By the way, I was right about that, and I think most of you know that now. But again, I was the hater at the time because it wasn't what everybody wanted to hear. But the Let Rand Cook crew has not changed from, man, this offseason was supposed to yield better results. This offense was supposed to be better. This defense isn't forcing any turnovers. What's going on here? They got no answer at right guard, PTs at right tackle. What do we do? What they've done is they've turned into, this is a rebuild. It's a rebuild, Jared. And my favorite part about it, my guy on the YouTube chat, the distinguished gentleman, this guy, Ian, he let us have it for a month every day.
He would bring it
about
up.
Our expectations for the season. Mine was 5 wins. Ian's were 4. He'd bring it up every single day. He was talking 10 wins. He was talking playoffs. After they lost the first 2 games, he kept saying, we're going to win 3 in a row. Kept saying it. Then Malik came in here and put a bone up their ass. But that hasn't changed them from everything's peachy and rainbows. Now it's a rebuild. And my favorite thing is I could see the YouTube chat. And the first thing he said is, it doesn't matter what you think. Let Rand cook. This is a rebuild. I've said it since day one. 2-year rebuild. And this is the Will Levis prove it year. They've changed their tune. It was everything's great this offseason. This team's cooking. Big bad Vrabel. He's the one that was causing all the problems. We've got Coach Callie in here. We've got Bill Callahan to fix the offensive line. Let Rand cook, Jared. That was that crew. Hey, we spent $8 million on a running back. We just let the best running back in the league go, but we spent $8 million on a running back. Jared, come on, stop being a hater. This was never a rebuild. Okay? This was never a rebuild. Very few teams in the NFL actually rebuild. In fact, what is rebuilding in the NFL? How many teams are rebuilding right now, which means everybody's on board and they know they're not going to be good this year and they're okay with it? Maybe one, New England. Last year, there was Arizona. Arizona was totally okay with losing every game last year because they had a new coach, a new general manager, but most importantly, their $46 million a year quarterback tore his ACL in December the year before, so they knew they were going to be playing with nobody at quarterback, and they were just going to be treading water. Now Arizona wants to win games. But the idea of rebuilding, that doesn't happen very often in the NFL. I mean, again, let's look around the league. New England, you can argue New England's rebuilding, which is why I'm totally okay with Jacoby Brissett being their quarterback. And now I'm starting to hear that, well, it may be time for Drake May. I'm like, oh, that's great. You have the worst offensive line in the league. Your offensive line in New England is worse than the Titans' offensive line. You're going to go put a 21-year-old or 22-year-old, I think he's 21. You're going to go put a 21, 22-year-old quarterback under center behind the worst offensive line in the NFL. Don't do that. Just trust me. Just trust me. Like, don't do that. So New England, you can argue, is rebuilding. Carolina is, I guess, in theory, rebuilding, but they just benched their young quarterback for Andy Dalton, so that doesn't seem like a rebuild to me. Jacksonville's the worst team in the AFC. Their owner came out and said they need to win now. He said this was the most talented roster Jacksonville's ever assembled before the season. Don't think they're rebuilding. Again, I'm not going to say that nobody rebuilds in the NFL because Arizona last year was rebuilding. But rebuilding for me is not, let's go spend a bunch of money on veterans and free agency and then draft run-stuffing DTs and let's call it a rebuild. The Titans weren't rebuilding when they entered 2023. And I know that because they drafted a guard with the 11th overall pick. Nobody thinks to themselves and says, you know what we're looking for to start to really rebuild our franchise? A guard. Nobody does that. So you may say it because it makes you feel better now that, oh no, this is a rebuild. It's okay that we suck. But that's not what the Titans were pitching before the start of the season. And I can promise you that when the owner spent the money that they spent this offseason, I hesitate to say when the owner spent all the money she spent, because we talk about this money as if it's like so much money and you still have a bottom half of the league payroll. But when she spent money this year on L'Jarius Sneed and spent money, if you're rebuilding, why are you trading a third-round pick for a corner in a rebuild? Again, Arizona was rebuilding last year. What did Arizona do after the draft? They released DeAndre Hopkins. Why? Because a rebuilding team doesn't need DeAndre Hopkins. Why did the Titans not trade Derrick Henry at the deadline last year? So please stop with this whole rebuilding. There's no evidence of it. So again, Brian Callahan sitting here talking playoffs, and I've got the boo-hoo Titan crew. Again, I think it's a very small percentage of the fan base now, because I think most of the fan base is pretty disappointed with what they've seen. But I do see like the boo-hoo side of this still be, it's a rebuild, Jared, it's okay. And then again, I ask this question. So what's the point of the season? If it's a rebuild and you're trying to rebuild your football team, what is the point of winning games this year with Tony Pollard? If you're rebuilding when you're good again, Tony Pollard's not going to be on this team. So again, I'm kind of trying to figure out what the point of the Titan season is right now. But it's my grandfather, the late Sidney Stillman. It's my guy right there. My grandfather, my uncle always tells the story that when he worked with my grandfather, he'd walk into his office and he'd say, Pop, we're going out to lunch. What do you want? We're going to Wendy's. What do we want? And he'd say, I don't want the chicken sandwich. And he'd say, well, I asked you what you want, not what you don't want. And I say that because I'm trying to find meaning in the Titan season, the remainder of it. I can tell you what it's not, though. And I can tell you that it's not a rebuild. I can tell you that right now. This is not a rebuild. This is not a, hey, let's tear this down and build. No, you don't go buy the players they bought. And you'll buy a $25 million receiver who is 29 years old if you're rebuilding. The reality is the Titans thought they had a good enough quarterback and that they were going to coach him up and they were going to put a team around him and they were going to compete this year. They haven't done that because this quarterback stinks, much to their surprise. But don't start calling it something that it's not. This was not a year the Titans went into saying, boys, it's going to be tough this year. We're going to take this on the chin. They did the opposite. Every podcast interview, every single one of them did was about how great things were. Not, hey, this is a rebuild. Even Chad Brinker, the guy who talks very, very, very much and says very, very little. Chad Brinker, he said, hey, we want our fans to be patient, but we know our jobs are to win immediately. That's not a rebuild. So, again, I can't tell you what the rest of the season, I can't tell you what it means. But I can tell you. I can tell you what it doesn't mean. And it doesn't mean rebuild. All right, your phone, 615-737-1025. A lot of you want to weigh in, so that's what we'll do. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game.
So with Will, I guess, is just going to monitor him through the course of the week. Have you seen improvement since last week?
No, we'll see. I mean, he did a little treatment. He was here for most of the week and the weekend. He got out for a day or two, like everybody else did. But he's in the improving, and so we'll see where he's at when we practice Wednesday. But he's definitely better than he was, after the game.
That was Brian Callahan yesterday. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious Will Levis is starting at quarterback on Sunday against the Colts. There will be talk, that so-and-so is he's questionable for the game, and if they don't sign a third quarterback, that means that he's fine. And again, I think it's kind of a obvious tell to what happened Monday night in Miami that, again, I'm convinced Will Levis could have gone back in the game, and the Titans decided, no, let's make sure you're okay. Let's make sure you're okay just because we think we can win with the other guy. And the Titans didn't bring in a quarterback last week. They're not bringing in a quarterback this week. I don't believe they have a third quarterback on their practice squad. I mean, think about this. If Will Levis can't get all the practice reps, who's playing quarterback for the Colts in practice? Because if Levis can't run through practice, then Rudolph is in there at quarterback. So who's on the other field? Don't tell me the Titans are going to prepare for Indianapolis with Mason Kinsey playing quarterback. So the fact that they haven't signed another quarterback, maybe they sign one tomorrow morning. But if they don't do that by tomorrow morning, then Levis is starting and he'll be fine. So again, I am looking for meaning in the rest of this Titan season. And it is not a rebuild, no matter how much you're now trying to tell yourself that it is. The distinguished gentleman who thought they were going to win 10 games on the YouTube chat saying, I've said all along it was a rebuild. Rebuilding teams don't win 10 games. So don't tell me that. This is crazy talk over here. Steven says, I think the goal of the Titans season is a winning record and a thorough assessment of Will Levis. Now, see, here's what's crazy. I think I know what Will Levis is. I think that for the most part, you know what Will Levis is. My guess is 70% of the Titans fan base thinks this guy sucks and it is what it is, but we kind of hitched our wagon to him, so we're stuck. And then I think there's 30% of the fan base that is like, no, Jared, you got to give him time. Peyton Manning threw interceptions, Jared. And I think the 30%, the owner may sit in that category, which means the coach, who I think is in the 70%, the coach has to placate the owner, who's in the 30%, for the thorough assessment of Will Levis. Well, the assessment going in on the Will Levis experiment was that you thought a guard was better than he was. And right now, I don't know how you could have any hope that Will Levis is going to learn to not turn the ball over. So, I mean, you want a thorough assessment. We want to win as many games as possible, and we want a thorough assessment of Will Levis. And by the way, those two contradict each other because right now you have a better shot to win games with the other guy. One texter says the Titans will struggle to get to 5 wins. What are you talking about with the playoffs? Look, I'm just telling you that if you win on Sunday against Indianapolis, which I don't think would be crazy, because I watched Indy play Jacksonville on Sunday, and I think Indy is awful. I think Indianapolis is one of the sorriest collection of talent teams in the NFL. I think they're horribly constructed. I think they've got a bad coach with a big ego, and I think the owner's the problem there too. And so they're favored by 1. So, I mean, again, I don't know if I'm going to pick the Titans to win or not. I haven't really thought too much about it. But you could beat Indianapolis on Sunday. You beat Indy on Sunday at 2-3. As crazy as it sounds, you're actually in the playoff discussion. That's why the Jets fired their coach today, because they're in the playoff discussion for whatever that's worth. But you can't get both. We want to win as many games as possible. You can't do that and get an assessment of Levis. And then the idea of, they're going to struggle to win 5 games. I agree. But I do think that they've got a shot to win on Sunday. One texter says, Jared, as a season ticket holder, I want to go to the games to be excited and watch winning football. But the general fan in me doesn't want to be stuck with a 6-win team with a mid-round, first-round draft pick. See, that's the problem, though, is I know what Brian Callahan's doing. Like every time he has a press conference, he talks about winning games. Yesterday, he talked about all the teams that are jumbled up in there and how, hey, if we win this game, we're right in there. And I know what he's doing. He's never going to go to the podium, and he's never going to say, we're better off losing, because most football people don't believe that. And the other thing, too, is Robert Saleh got fired today, and people are counting his record. And they're like, he was 26-50 as head coach or whatever he was. Well, they don't count. Well, he's rebuilding this year. He had Zach Wilson that year, and so this is not fair. That's not what they do. But again, by spending every week saying, hey, we want to win, we want to do our best to go out there and win the game, and we want to, try to put our defense out there, and we want to throw the ball to Hopkins and Ridley, and we don't want to tear this team apart, and you're going to win 6 games, and you're going to be picking 9th. And so you're going to get the 3rd best tackle in the draft. You're going to get the 4th best receiver or the 5th best quarterback, because that's how these things work. That's why, again, I'm not against tanking, even though I am primarily an anti-tanker. Because, as Chris Sanders says, if you play the same record, you'll get the same song. Well, if the Titans take this crappy team and they try to compete with it, they're going to do the exact same thing they did last year, which is win 6 games and pick the 2nd best tackle. One texter says, I want Travis Hunter, and I'll do whatever it takes to get him. I mean, right now, I guess Travis Hunter probably is the number 1 pick in the draft. I see a lot of this stuff, and I know it's early, and I know quarterbacks get pushed up. And, again, I don't think anybody this time last year had Jaden Daniels as the number 2 pick and the savior of the Commanders, which it looks like Jaden Daniels is. Though I did do a dive on the numbers with Jaden Daniels earlier today, and I was actually pretty fascinated by what I found. But it seems like this is a bad year for quarterbacks, which is at least a little disheartening. It's a little troubling. If you want to get the next Mahomes or Allen or Burrow or Jackson or whoever, Stroud, Daniels. One texter says, I believe the Titans are a playoff defense. I will believe the Titans are a playoff defense when they beat a playoff quarterback. Well, so here's the thing about the defense. I think the defense is good. I think the defense is probably a top 12 defense in the league. They don't get any turnovers, though. So you can't be an elite defense if you don't get any turnovers. But the one thing I'm going to say before we sit here and we poo-poo the defense, because they lost to Chicago and they lost to the Jets and they lost to the Packers, we know it's not their fault they lost to Chicago. That was the quarterback's fault. I would have preferred they get a stop there at the end of the game against the Jets. They didn't. But for the most part, they played good enough. And against the Packers, they give up a touchdown on the first drive, which wasn't good, but they had to feel out what the Packers were going to try to do. They hold Malik to a field goal on the second drive. Levis throws a pick 6. Now it's a 10-point game, and now Green Bay can do whatever they want. Because now you've got a quarterback that has no confidence, can't throw, and the entire stadium's ready to run him out of town. So they don't have a problem going run, punt on you. And now your defense probably feels like we have to make a play. So I'm not going to hold the Green Bay loss specifically against the defense. But the defense doesn't really generate a ton of pressure, and they don't get turnovers. So it's hard for me to say you have an elite defense. And also, you did this with Snoop Huntley, Caleb Williams, Malik. But I think the defense can get you into the playoffs. If you had Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry, I think you're in the playoffs with this defense. Even without a right tackle. At least you have a left tackle. One texter says, I don't care to hear any other quarterback talk. I could not care less about 5 wins with Mason Rudolph. That I feel likely. One texter says the Patriots are the Patriots benching Jacoby Brissett for Drake May. Is that official?
I have not seen that.
Might be. Michael's up next on the phone. Thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting patiently. 615-737-1025. Go, Michael.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. I just want to say that I am scared to death of this game coming up on Sunday, even though I agree with you the Colts are a bad team this year. And that defense has just been absolutely horrendous. I just know we've seen this play out before. They've let up multiple almost 400-yard passing games, 200-plus yard games on the ground all year this year. And all of a sudden, they're just going to turn into the 85 Bears on us just because I just don't think that our quarterback can even come close to doing what these other quarterbacks have done against the Colts defense, even though it has been extremely poor this year so far.
I cannot get over how terrible the Colts are. Thank you for your call. Especially on that side of the ball. They are dead last in the NFL in defense. They can't stop the run. They can't do anything. Joe Flacco went out there through 340 or whatever it was last week, and they still lost. If the Colts defense turns into the 85 Bears and you lose on Sunday, well, then I think if you lose on Sunday, then I think everybody has to embrace tanking. Even though, again, I know winners don't tank, yeah. But if you get shut down by the 32nd defense in the NFL, there's probably no real coming back from that. 615-737-1025. The Jets have fired Robert Saleh. I don't understand how this is a controversial move at all. We'll touch on that next. 615-737-1025. If you want to weigh in, that's 615-737-1025. Join us Sunday for the award-winning pregame show, 9:30 to 11:30. Me, Chris, Derek, live at JBJ's. It's Bon Jovi's downtown and on Broadway. The award-winning pregame show is presented by Parman Tractor and Equipment, Sundeck Nashville, Sloan's Motorcycle ATV, and award-winning Blue Note Juke Joint and Blue Note Crossroads Bourbon. This week's Nationals best deal is the Fog Street Lawn Club. Get half off a $30 gift card now at thegamenational.com/deals and dive into the ultimate rooftop experience, British lawn bowling, scrumptious bites, and premier soccer pub vibes. Get half off a $30 gift card to Fog Street Lawn Club now while supplies last. So it is official. The New England Patriots have announced that Drake May is going to be their starting quarterback on Sunday against the Texans. I mean, so they have the worst offensive line in the NFL. Going into last week, Pro Football Focus ranked the Titans 31 in terms of the offensive line. New England was 32. You have the worst offensive line in the league, but you're so impatient that you're going to put this young quarterback under center with the worst offensive line in the league against the Texans. I mean, it amazes me how many decisions in the NFL get made that are not thought out whatsoever. Or they're too thought out, like they paralysis by analysis. But I hear everybody going into the draft tell me that Drake May's not ready to play. And I keep thinking about all the quarterbacks who succeeded by sitting on the bench. And I think about all the quarterbacks who have failed because, like last year, people were, we got to find out what we have in Levis, Jared. I'm like, you're going to get him killed behind that offensive line. We got to find out what we have. He plays a couple of games, and now all of a sudden they build an entire team around him, and he's terrible. So, I mean, if I'm New England, I keep Brissett out there and take it on the chin until I'm really, really ready to put the kid in there. And I'm talking like week 16 against Miami, not against the Texans. So today the Jets fired Robert Saleh. And if you were listening to yesterday's program, we did one segment on the NFL since the Titans had a bye week and Vanderbilt just pulled off the upset of the century. So we did one segment on the NFL, and I kind of hit on all these different NFL thoughts that I had from the week. And one of the thoughts I kept having was the Jets have to fire Robert Saleh. Now, I'm not a Robert Saleh guy. And I haven't been a Robert Saleh guy for about 3 years. I think it was when Zach Wilson was asked about whether or not he let the defense down, and Zach Wilson said no, and everybody came after Zach Wilson for saying that, including Saleh, and I said, this guy does not know how to be a head coach. Last year he got a pass because Aaron Rodgers got hurt, but you read the Diana Rossini article in The Athletic about the dysfunction with the Jets, and it's like they got real problems in the hierarchy of that organization. And it's not just Aaron. Aaron's an issue, but at least Aaron's an issue with upside. Saleh hasn't done anything right in this league, and he just kept getting opportunity after opportunity. Well, the Jets are 2-3. They're not 0-5. They're a game back of first place. According to NFL.com, they got a 63% chance of making the playoffs. They're not going to get rid of Aaron, so you can go ahead and take that out. They had to do something. That team is the definition of dysfunction. Well, if you can't fire the quarterback and the owner's not going to fire himself, there's really only one choice you have. Fire the coach. So I have no problem with the Jets firing Robert Saleh. In fact, I think it's the only move they could make. Now, that being said, I don't think this is going to solve every issue they have. I don't think that all of a sudden, Saleh's gone, now we're good. But I do think that if you're the Jets and you're all in on this season, and this season still has a pulse, then you've got to do something, and this is the only thing you could do. My favorite is the report that came out that apparently Robert Saleh was considering firing Nathaniel Hackett when he got fired. Dysfunction at its finest. He didn't want Hackett, but he wanted Rodgers, and the owner wanted this, and the general manager wanted that. I've always talked about the hard reset that I think every organization, if you're truly committed to turning things around, has to go through, where everybody kind of gets fired at the same time and you start over. The way the Commanders have a new GM, new coach, new quarterback. I think the Jets at the end of this year are due for the hard reset. I think they're due. But as of right now, you're paying Aaron Rodgers. You've got Aaron Rodgers. Like, Well, let's try to make the best of a bad situation, and the way to do that is to fire the coach. Now, I don't know anything about this Jeff Ulbrich, who is going to be their head coach. I don't know if it's going to be any different. I don't know if Woody Johnson's going to screw things up or Aaron's going to screw things up, or I don't know. I just know that when it comes to the Jets, this was the only card they had to play, and I think it's a good thing for them that they played it. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. One texter says the rebuild that the Titans are currently in, it's trying to reestablish the Titans as a winning franchise. They have new pieces from players to coaches, and they are always optimistic about turning a corner and everything clicking. As fans, we need some type of hope to keep showing up this season. I think as far as fan hope is concerned, I think it's pretty low. I mean, think about this. Again, this is the show where everybody gets mad at the host. Again, I've said, I think that 2/3 of the listeners of this program do not like me. So that it's, we're cut into thirds. 1/3 of the people like me, like the show. 1/3 of the people like the show, hate me. And then 1/3 of the people hate the show and hate me, and they listen the most. But I don't hear a lot of people saying, Jared, this team is going to make the playoffs. You watch. I don't see a lot of that. So I think what happened is the team took out a line of credit from the fans this year. They spent money in free agency, albeit not as much as everybody made a big deal out to be. They lost very valuable players to the team that they didn't replace, like Nico Iamaleava. But they brought some shiny new toys in, like a running back and a receiver and a corner. And so everybody got excited. The coach is a nice guy, which was a different touch from the previous guy. And they pumped a lot of sunshine throughout the offseason. The fans, optimistic, bought it. And now I think the fans are kind of like, yeah, but the fat guy on the radio says you don't have a right tackle, and he might be onto something there. And I think that, again, the Titans have kind of burned up a lot of that credit as far as trying to, relaunch the winning brand of the Titans. I mean, if you want the winning brand, play the other quarterback because he's going to win more games. Not going to win enough games, but he's going to win more. One texter says, if you're willing to do the hard reset and let the young guy sit, why not just let Will Levis stay in the whole season and let him know no matter what, he's going to be the starting quarterback till the end of the year and take the pressure off of him and see if he can learn? I mean, again, I have never called for Mason Rudolph to start. And I want to make that abundantly clear to everybody because I don't see the upside in it. So fine. Will, you're starting. I don't think it's going to make any difference. I mean, the Titans did everything they could to roll out the red carpet to tell him he's the starter this year, and he's gone out there and played like crap. So, I mean, if you tell him he's the starter now, who knows? 615-737-1025. Speaking of fans and hope and anger, the callers to the Paul Feinbaum show yesterday were not very happy about what happened on West End on Saturday. You have got to hear that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So yesterday, we spent pretty much the whole show. We did some Vols yesterday and one segment of the NFL, but we spent pretty much yesterday on Vanderbilt's big win over Alabama. We had Clark Lee on the program, thought it was a great interview. Proud of Vanderbilt, greatest moment in Vandy football history. Way to go. Today, we got to talk about Alabama. Today, we got to have a talk about Alabama and something that I would never have envisioned happened on Saturday night. And even though Nick Saban apparently wasn't part of the bulletin board material, I think he shares some egg on his face in this one because of his comments about Vanderbilt a couple weeks ago. But boy, the callers to the Paul Feinbaum show were not happy about Kalen DeBoer. How long did the honeymoon last after the Georgia game? It was 1 week, and I think they're a little frustrated in Alabama.
Oh, Paul, I'm the first Bama caller for you today, huh?
Welcome in.
How great. Hey, I wore my hat today. At least I didn't play like Malachi Moore and act like a little brat. And, you know, I faced it like a man today, like most of us I'm sure did. But I tell you what, I would have went out there on the field and grabbed him up by his shoulder pads and chunked him off myself.
Well, first I got to say, Nick Saban has left the building. Officially, he is gone. Do you think, and Paul, this is a question for you, Paul Feinbaum, do you think there's a cultural shift and a cultural problem within the Alabama program? Yes or no?
Yes. Bubba in South Carolina. Bubba, go right ahead.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
We are doing
well. I
want
to call in to talk about that. I don't understand this DeBoer hire. He can't get these boys playing defense. He's got 17-year-olds at wide receiver, and I just don't understand why they didn't go get Dabo Swinney from Clemson.
Well, because nobody wanted Dabo Swinney.
What would Bear Bryant have done had Malachi Moore shuffled him off by saying, I'm not coming out of this game. I don't care what you guys are saying. What do you think the Bear would have done?
Hey, by the way, Paul, when's the last time Saban lost to Vanderbilt? When was that?
How about never?
How about never? Damn, never thought about that.
Hey, Daddy. Hey, what happened, Daddy? Because from my side, from my perspective, it looked like them intellectuals up there in Nashville that were smaller whooped y'all's ass on national TV. And Daddy, I'm just trying to understand, Daddy, because it looked bad, didn't it?
Well, I guess what you're referring to is all the Alabama fans calling in last week and saying that they were now Georgia's daddy.
So the hillbillies in Alabama are mad at Kalen DeBoer. Nick Saban has left the building, but Bear Bryant have allowed that. Guys, I understand. You're mad. First of all, I can't get over some of those. You know, that we should have hired Dabo Swinney. Yeah, because Dabo's doing so well. One thing is abundantly clear, and the Alabama fans are starting to learn it. Nick Saban's not the coach anymore. What did you think happened the day he retired? Did you think the next coach Alabama was going to go get was going to be exactly like Nick Saban? And this is why you don't want to be the guy that replaces the guy. Because even though Alabama, if the playoff were held today, Alabama would still be in it. Even though Alabama beat Georgia, these Alabama fans are ready to run this new guy out of town after one loss. Do these guys know Kalen DeBoer has a record of 108-13? Do these guys know that Kalen DeBoer coached in the national championship game last year? They do know that. But what they can't understand is that he's not Nick Saban. He's not going to be Nick Saban. So once they decide, well, whoa, we're used to Saban. We want Saban. Well, I mean, what are we doing? Like, I mean, we need to, we're Saban. He retired. Like, there was a reason that they paid Nick Saban all the money that they paid Nick Saban over the years, because there's only one Nick Saban. And Alabama had a choice to make. They could have promoted a Saban assistant, made him the head coach, but the track record is very mixed when it comes to Nick Saban assistants. For every Steve Sarkisian, there's a Will Muschamp. For every Kirby Smart, there's a Jeremy Pruitt. And I can go on and on. Even Jimbo Fisher, he's got a mixed track record himself. Bobby Williams replaced Nick Saban at Michigan State. And, well, you probably don't know much about Bobby Williams, do you? So Alabama had a choice to make when they decided to replace Nick Saban. They could either go hire the best guy they could go get. Again, a guy who finished second last year, the guy who finished first went to the NFL, and has a career record again of 108-13. Or they could go try to get somebody to replicate what Nick Saban had built. But again, this is why you don't want to be the guy who replaces the guy. Nick Saban was a dictator when he was at Alabama, and he was one of the best kinds. I talked about this when Brian Callahan got hired. People love this collaborating coach, this nice guy. He's even nice to the media. Oh, what a breath of fresh air from Mike Vrabel. All the players said, oh, guys can be themselves. That's not Nick Saban. But that's the new age coach. Well, Kalen DeBoer is going to be the new age coach. There's an article in the Alabama paper today. Kalen DeBoer does not wear an Alabama polo on the sideline. How dare he? Because he's not Nick Saban. But the reason behind why Nick Saban was the way he was because Nick Saban wanted to run a disciplined operation. Nick Saban knew we have to win every game or everybody's going to be mad. Nick Saban's teams were built on discipline. He told the players, don't look at the scoreboard. Every play is the same. Don't worry about the score. If you do what you're supposed to do, the score will take care of itself. Well, I've watched Kalen DeBoer now coach a couple of games in back-to-back weeks, and I saw how Alabama packed it in after they got the big lead on Georgia. He's not preaching the same message. Kalen DeBoer's not about discipline and focus. But again, that doesn't mean he's a bad coach. That just means he values other things. And he's probably valuing the same things that made him successful in the NAIA level, Fresno State, and Washington. And that's what they hired. But the problem here, again, is the standard with which he's replacing. It's Nick Saban. And everybody there, as much... This is the first time that anything went wrong for Kalen DeBoer. Granted, it was awful. Just awful that they lost to Vanderbilt on Saturday. But all anybody ever talks about right now is that, well, this isn't Nick Saban. Well, it never was going to be Nick Saban. So if you're an Alabama fan or if you're judging Alabama, you've got two choices. You can either sit there and look out the window and pine for Nick Saban, who's not coming back, and ask for a Saban replica to come in and be your coach. Or you can realize that you just got maybe the best coach in the country last year to come in here and to be the next coach at Alabama, and it's going to take time for him to be able to do things his way. Granted, he inherited a good team and a great program, but the way he does things at Washington, the way he did things it's not going to be the way Nick Saban does things. He's not going to wear a polo on the sidelines. Most coaches don't wear polos. Have you seen Brian Callahan on the sideline? He doesn't wear a polo. But again, this is Alabama. And at Alabama, entitlement runs deep. It's something Saban used to yell at the fans about all the time on his radio show. Why he used to talk about rat poison. It's why he used to talk all of those things. because the standard is so high at Alabama that if you lose one game, all of a sudden, well, Bear Bryant wouldn't have done that, and Nick Saban wouldn't have done that, and you're right. Nick Saban wouldn't have done that. But that doesn't mean that Kalen DeBoer is not a good coach. And now we're going to see what's going to win out here. Because I believe Alabama's probably got another loss left in them this season. We're going to see what wins out. Because, again, if your record as a coach is 108-13, I don't care who you beat, you're a good coach. Is Alabama going to bend a knee to the hillbilly fans that call Paul Feinbaum and say, well, he doesn't wear a polo on the sidelines, and he, didn't hold Malachi Moore responsible for what he was supposed to, and he didn't this and that? Or are they going to say, no, we hired a good coach. You guys need to just let him coach and stay out of it. And I don't know what the answer is going to be, because I know how much people are worried about screwing up something that is as big as replacing Nick Saban. But if Alabama fans are going to sit here today and say, that's not Nick Saban coaching our team, why did you think people made such a big deal when he retired? So no, I'm not out on a coach who's 108-13, who took Washington to the national championship game. I'm not out on him. And an Alabama fan shouldn't be either. Now, if this is year 4 and they're a 7-win team and they lose to Vandy, now you can fire the coach. But, articles written about the fact that Kalen DeBoer wears a T-shirt on the sideline when that's what most college coaches do nowadays? Seriously? 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Now, there was something that I said I was going to do. And I didn't do it over the weekend, but I did do it yesterday. And I know Nick Saban wouldn't have done this, but it was truly a red flag for me. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company and your phones, 1025-1063 The Game.
Was there some chirping going back and forth by Alabama with you guys during the game?
Yeah. So at the beginning of the game, I go out there as a captain. We go out there, coin toss. They were talking crazy.
Like what?
Like they thought they were gonna come in here and treat us like we were an FCS team, and we're like, what? Like, what do you must not know? You know what I mean? Like, all right, we're gonna see. That's why I kept telling them, like, all right, we're gonna see. And they're laughing, talking, like, I can't say it on the show because I can't curse, but yeah, they were talking crazy. So when they said, we're taking the ball, they're kicking off, we didn't even shake their hands after. We just took off to the sideline.
That was Diego Pavia on the Dan Patrick Show saying, these guys, like, they had no respect for us. Like, what are we talking about? So somebody texted us in Saturday night when we did the 2-hour special after the Vanderbilt postgame show about Vanderbilt's win over Alabama. And I was looking at it, and I saw the text that said that Kalen DeBoer did not mention Vanderbilt one time all week. In any press conference, didn't talk about Vandy, didn't talk about the game, and I'm like, that can't be right. That cannot be right. Normally all of these coaches, when they have their opening press conference of the week, even when they're playing Scarbini State, they get up there and they start talking about, hey, we got a big one this week with the College of Charleston. Because even though they don't have a football team, they really do. They stop the run well. And they are a team we really got to be worried about them. We got to have a great week of practice. The Johnson has come in here. He's averaging 13.7 yards per throw. So we're certainly going to have to be worried about that. And of course, we're going to have to make sure that our kicking game is sound this week as we go out there against nobody Tech. So I'm like, I cannot believe Kalen DeBoer, a coach who's, again, 108-13 in his career. There's no way that this guy disrespected Vanderbilt so bad that he got up there, had a press conference, and didn't talk about Vandy at all. There's no way. I just couldn't believe that. So this morning I sat down and I watched his Monday press conference from last week. So this is after the Georgia game. His pre-Vanderbilt press conference. He did not mention Vanderbilt one time. The one reference that he made to Vanderbilt was, this is, tomorrow when we go out there on the field, we got to have the best Tuesday we've had all year because we're trying to maintain a standard. That was it. Nothing about Vandy, nothing about Clark, nothing about Diego Pavia, nothing about the fact that, hey, they just went to double overtime with Missouri. That's a good football team we got to be worried about. 16 minutes of my life. And you want to talk about watching paint dry? Listening to a 16-minute press conference about Alabama's game against Georgia 2 weeks ago this morning was literally painful. Like, I was so bored. Oh, my God. I felt like I was 6 years old again. I'm like, please, somebody save me from this boredom. And yet I felt like, there's no way that this guy could have taken questions for a Monday press conference and not mention Vandy one time. And he didn't do it. He didn't mention Vandy, didn't mention Clark, didn't mention Diego, and he didn't get a question on it. They were all about, what have the tight ends done so well, Coach, that have made them such a good play? Well, I tell you, the tight ends have really done this and they've done that. What's Ryan Williams got to do to not get distracted being 17 years old out there playing? Well, I'll tell you, he's got this, he's got to. How'd the fans, how'd you feel about that on Saturday? Boy, I tell you, our fans are the best. I'll tell you, I couldn't believe it. Now, again, not to be the Nick Saban would have done that. But Nick Saban would have got up at that podium on Monday after they beat Georgia on Saturday. Nick Saban would have got up at that podium, and the first question you would have asked about Georgia, he would have been like, y'all just disrespecting Vanderbilt. They just went on the road to Missouri, all right, and they're ranked in the top 10. And if they made a field goal, they win that game, all right? So everybody around here sitting there celebrating because we've done something. We didn't do anything. We won a game on Saturday because we prepared and we did what we were supposed to do. Now we got to do it again this week for a quarterback who's very good. Y'all may not respect him, but I do. That's what Saban would have done. That's a red flag to me when it does come to Kalen DeBoer. Again, I can't tell you that this guy's not going to win at Bama because this guy's won everywhere he's been. But it is kind of a red flag that this guy would get up there and he would just completely dismiss an upcoming game. And I don't even care if it's an FCS school. I don't care if it's Slippery Rock. But it's a conference game. And he got up there and he just totally dismissed it. I mean, yesterday we had Clark Lee on the show, and Clark Lee starts mentioning Kentucky in the second answer. He starts talking when I've asked him about looking in the mirror after what happened last year. Because let me say this. Clark Lee was very excited about the 2023 season. I know it was a train wreck for Vandy, but he was very excited going into the year thinking they were going to have a good year. And I went to that Kentucky game. I stayed for a half. I mean, it was like 24-0 before you could blink. And he said, he goes, it's funny thinking about the Kentucky game last year and how I felt like we didn't put a very good effort out there and we know what they're capable of. And Kentucky. Today I listened to his press conference and Clark's up there talking about how, hey, we've told the team that people are going to congratulate you this week for what you did last week and respect that and say thank you. But as far as we're concerned inside this building, we've moved on. We're done with Alabama. We've moved on. We're on Kentucky. So, again, not to sit here and tell you that this guy's supposed to be Nick Saban because, again, when Nick Saban is one of one. So when you're Alabama, you have two choices. You can either go get a guy who's going to try to be Nick Saban without actually being Nick Saban, or you can try to go get the best coach on the market. And I don't have a problem with him getting the best coach on the market. But I'm trying to figure out how this guy has such a good record if he's just going to simply overlook an opponent or talk about the last game ad nauseum when, again, most of the coaches that I've been around, they're not interested in talking about the last game. Whether they won it, whether they lost it, they're not interested in talking about it. Brian Callahan's a little different. Brian Callahan on a Wednesday, he'll talk about last week's game. Most coaches are not that way. And I guess Kalen DeBoer, he does something different, but I was shocked. Just even though somebody had said, they texted and said, he didn't say Vanderbilt in any of his press conferences, didn't say it once. I figured surely that was wrong. By the way, again, a word of advice. And I know we all have things in our jobs that we don't love to do. Do not make yourself sit through 16 minutes of a week-old Alabama football press conference that's not Nick Saban chiding a reporter for some question he doesn't like. Again, back when it was Saban, it was a little different because there are usually some fireworks there or something. But didn't mention Vanderbilt one time. And I can't get over that. That's what bad coaches do. Bad coaches are the ones that overlook these teams. 615-737-1025. One texter says, Alabama fans have been spoiled for so long they don't know how to handle it. Well, Alabama fans didn't know how to handle stuff before Nick Saban, but it's going to take a while for them to accept what reality is when they're treated like everybody else. And who knows? Again, Kalen DeBoer did win a lot of games before he showed up in Tuscaloosa. So that doesn't mean that he can't do it. But it's it took the world a year. Well, I'd say it took the world probably 2.5 years, midway through 2022, to realize that the New England Patriots without Tom Brady were just another team. And it's going to take a while for that to happen in Tuscaloosa too. Joey from Bellevue says, Clark Lee mentioned Kentucky on the field Saturday, on the field during the post-game interview. Yeah, I mean, again, this idea that he didn't mention Vandy. I mean, look, it doesn't matter if you win the game. It doesn't matter. But if you lose, it really is a whole, what in the world were you thinking? What were you thinking? A la Dr. Phil. What were you thinking? How'd that work out for you? 615-737-1025 is our phone number. If you want to weigh in, that's 615-737-1025 here on our program. So I am fascinated, just fascinated by Jaden Daniels and what's happened with the Washington Commanders. Because this time last year, the Commanders sucked with a quarterback who was supposedly a good draft prospect, didn't have a great last year of college, slipped in the draft. After a year, they were convinced he could start for them, and he almost threw for 5,000 yards last year, but he did turn the ball over 21 times that season. Levis is on pace to throw 26 interceptions this year. And all of a sudden, the Washington Commanders hit the reset button, drafted Jaden Daniels, and now they're really, really, really good. And it makes it hard for me to not want to tank so that you can draft this year's Jaden Daniels. But I did a dive on the whole Jaden Daniels thing, and I am fascinated by what I saw. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
There is a lot of talk about a game this weekend between the Ravens and the Commanders. You've got a two-time MVP and the reigning most valuable player in Lamar Jackson, and he's going up against the greatest rookie sensation this league has seen since maybe ever, which raises a good question and a good point for the table here. Here is my statement. There has not been a rookie most valuable player in the NFL since 1957. That player was the great Jim Brown. Actually, can we get some Jim Brown footage? Just this is gratuitous. We just wanted it. Jim Brown in 1957 is the only rookie to ever win the MVP award. He was unbelievable as a rookie and, of course, would go on to have a Hall of Fame career, arguably the greatest NFL player to ever put on the pads. Which leads to a question I have for you guys.
Okay.
Tell me if you are in and out with this statement. 5 weeks into the 2024 season, Jaden Daniels, the rookie in Washington, is our league MVP. Are you in or are you out?
Okay, league MVP talk for Jaden Daniels. That was Peter Schrager this morning on the Good Morning Football program. I mean, I was a little surprised with the fact that on the Good Morning Football program, they actually talked football. You know, normally that Good Morning Football program, they talk things like, who had the best cleats this week? But I guess it's Tuesday, so they probably spent Monday talking about cleats. But I am fascinated by this Jaden Daniels thing because sometimes, not speaking for any one individual franchise, kind of talking in generalities here, but sometimes when your football team's not very good and you clearly don't have the guy at quarterback and you don't feel like adding a veteran quarterback to get you to the playoffs is worth it, and it's the middle of October and you're thinking you may be better off tanking the season because, again, the quarterback you have sucks, it does start to get a little juicy to see a C.J. Stroud do what he did last year for the Texans or to see what Jaden Daniels is starting to do for the Commanders. Now, I did watch 4 games in the noon kickoff window. I watched Houston and Buffalo. I watched Miami and New England. I watched Jacksonville and Indianapolis. And I can't even remember what the 4th game in the little multi-viewer was down at the bottom. I remember it was a game that I was fascinated by, but I forget what it was. So it obviously wasn't that important to me. But I didn't watch Washington and Cleveland. And I didn't watch train wreck that is Deshaun Watson, but I know what that looks like, so I'll take your word. But Jaden Daniels, as soon as that game was over, they went to the studio, and it was like all the guys around the desk were, wow, Jaden Daniels is the man. And I thought, maybe sometimes it is that simple. Nobody wants to tank because we want to be excited about the games, and I get it. But maybe it is that simple. So then I looked through the numbers, and I was fascinated by what I saw. Again, that's the NFL Network's flagship program talking about Jaden Daniels for league MVP. Did you know that Jaden Daniels has not thrown for 300 yards one time this season? Jaden Daniels' career high in passing is 254 yards. Tannehill gets you 254 yards almost weekly. Again, that's his career high. I'm not here to knock Jaden Daniels. He may end up being a great quarterback. He's a great college quarterback, and he does not turn the ball over, which is an important part and a delineation between what you have at quarterback and maybe what they have. But I looked at the difference between the Commanders last year and the Commanders this year. Last year, the Commanders were number 1 in passing attempts. This year, they're 30th. Again, everybody wants to throw the ball. Everybody wants to throw the ball. I remember when Brian Callahan got hired, and there was a clip from a press conference he did as the OC in Cincinnati where he said the team that passes the ball the best is going to win. And so many of you said, oh, thank God. Oh, Mike Vrabel in his 1970s football. We're going to throw the ball. The 2023 Commanders, number 1 in passing attempts, didn't win. The 24 Commanders, 4-1, number 30. Last year, the Commanders were 32nd in the league in rushing attempts. This year, they're number 2. Last year, because they threw the ball so much and their quarterback had a propensity for turning it over, they were minus 14 in turnovers. This year, they've turned it over 3 times. They've collected 3. They're at net 0. And because of that, their defense went from 32nd in the league because they weren't getting any breaks, because they were out there all the time, because they passed the ball and they never ran it. Their defense went from 32 to 14. Now, let me ask you this question. When it comes to the Commanders and the defense, and can anybody tell me what massive additions the Commanders made on defense this offseason? Ian, is there a player off the top of your head that you think, man, I tell you, Washington, they really went to the house to get that guy to play defense?
They brought in the linebacker from Seattle, Wagner, because of Quinn.
Who's about 93 years old.
And then they got rid of the young pass rusher, right? Chase Young. So they got rid of him. They got rid of Sweat. Those are all subtractions. No addition that really stands out.
I mean, they didn't go get L'Jarius Sneed. And so, again, they went from 32nd to 14. Now, there is one little caveat in this, and this is why, again, September football can be a little weird. Their opponent's win percentage for the entire year last year was .512. So their opponents were solid. So far this year, the best team they've beaten was 2-3 Arizona, and their opponent's winning percentage is .360. So they've played some bad teams. I mean, like Deshaun in Cleveland, Vandy might be able to beat them. But again, I think my big point, my big takeaway with Jaden Daniels was what the Commanders have done is the opposite of what everybody who drafts a young quarterback wants to do. Everybody who drafts a young quarterback, we want to throw the ball. The Chicago Bears didn't have a left tackle. They scared me to pieces in the NFL draft as the team that might jump up to 5 to draft Joe Alt, because I figured the Chargers, who didn't have any receivers, were going to go receiver, and it scared me to death that Chicago was going to jump up from 9, wherever they were, I think it was 9, from 9 to 5 to get Alt because they had no real left tackle. But nope, with our young quarterback, we're going to throw the ball and we're going to draft Rome Odunze, who's on the line. Doesn't matter. Oh, that'll work out well. These teams, they draft these young quarterbacks and they want them to pass. Pass, 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 pass. Floyd used to talk about this all the time. Floyd used to say two things that both kind of line up with where we are right now. Number one, the quickest way to get good in the NFL is to run the ball and play defense. That's the easiest way. Remember when the Titans were the worst team in the league? They brought in DeMarco Murray and they ran the ball. That's the first thing. They're second in the league in rushing attempts. Clearly, Washington is running the ball. And number two, he used to always tell me, he'd say, these offensive coordinators want to try to throw the ball up and down the field because that's how you get head coaching jobs. We never look at a team that runs the ball well and says, boy, I tell you, we want to get that coach. Well, Washington doesn't have to worry about that because their coach is a defensive guy. So when it comes to minimizing the risk with the young quarterback, you don't have to walk in his office and say, Coach, I'll tell you, we really probably need to run the ball to help, usher our young quarterback into the NFL. And he's looking at him with his backwards cap on saying, okay, fine. You don't have to pull my arm to do it. But some of these other coaches want to prove how good they are calling plays and throwing the ball that they go out of their way to call passing all the time. It wouldn't surprise me if Eric Bieniemy, who called the plays last year in Washington, again, where they were number one in the league in passing attempts, thought, this is my chance to prove I can do this without Mahomes, so we're going to pass the ball. And it makes me think a lot about the Titans. And it makes me think about what I have told you guys when it comes to building a team, and nobody wanted to hear it the entire offseason. You have to run the ball. Like, running the ball is good for a young quarterback. Because all that really matters about the quarterback position in the NFL is winning and losing. That's it. Jaden Daniels hasn't thrown for 300 yards. He's 30th in the league in passing attempts. And they're talking about him on TV being league MVP. Why? Because he's winning games. Granted, games over Daniel Jones, games over the corpse of Deshaun Watson, games over that awful Bengal defense, but he's winning games. And that's all anybody cares about when it comes to whether or not your quarterback is any good. That's why I said, when it came to Will Levis, I said, hey, all that matters with this guy is that he wins games. If he wins games, people have confidence in him because, again, the little plays that win or lose you games are not the things that people remember. All they remember is whether or not you won or lost. I've done this far too often to know that the tiniest little difference, the field goal going to the left or going to the right, sets the entire tone for the entire week. I remember week 1, the Titans lost to the Giants. In 2022, Randy Bullock missed a 47-yarder, which would have won the game. And that week, boy, people were mad at Derrick Henry. He didn't have it anymore. People were mad at Todd Downing. He called a terrible game. People were mad at the roster. They were mad at this. They were mad at that. Guy makes a field goal. Everyone's going to say, hey, tough fought win in week 1, and then you go on about your business. Washington is doing this right. And I'm not knocking Jaden Daniels, but Washington is doing this right. They are minimizing the risk with the young quarterback. They're putting him in positive situations, and he's built his confidence because of it. It's actually kind of genius. And yet far too many coaches and far too many teams want to take these young quarterbacks and say, all right, Billy, go win us the game. And I think that includes your coach too, who wanted to show I can do it this season when he came in. Jaden Daniels, again, look at the numbers. They're running the ball, and they're playing bad teams. It's not that complicated. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones on that. Plus, the Titans made a roster move today that, somebody help me out. Somebody help me understand this. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Let's talk about Window Nation. That's right. I absolutely love Window Nation. They're who I trust, and they're who you should trust too. Again, so many people have used Window Nation. And right now is the perfect time to do it because you can buy 2 windows. You'll get 2 windows for free. Plus, you'll pay nothing for 24 months. So hurry up because the sale ends October 31st. So schedule an in-home estimate right now by calling 866-90NATION or by visiting windownation.com. Again, buy 2 windows. You'll get 2 free and you'll pay nothing for 24 months. Sale ends October 31st. 866-90NATION. And again, call them right now at windownation.com.
Nick Petit-Frere solidify his spot at right tackle, or are you still looking there?
Yeah, I mean, he played pretty good Monday night. Again, it was he didn't get put in harm's way too often. We ran the ball pretty much the whole second half. But yeah, I mean, that's to me, that's going to be a week to week thing. And he needs to play well, and keeps playing well, and we'll keep competing. I don't want to put any parameters on that because, we'll see, I guess is the best way to put it.
Oh, hey, is PT still the right tackle? Well, I mean, I don't want to say that PT is the right tackle, but I guess PT is the right tackle for whatever that means. So the Titans made a roster move today. Actually, I was a little surprised by this one. When I got the email at 3 o'clock, the Titans waived offensive lineman John Ojukwu. Why was I surprised?
Yeah.
Well, he was active for the game on Monday night. Jalen Duncan was inactive.
That's true. Yeah.
And so, and on Monday night against the Dolphins, he was your swing tackle. The Dennis Kelly position, he was your swing tackle. And now he's not on the team.
Quite the shift.
Well, what happened in the spring when I kept saying, where's the right tackle? And everyone kept telling me, we've got guys who we think can do it. I said, so you're committing to Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a.?
PT.
You're committing to PT? No, we're not doing that. But we think PT's got a shot. We think Duncan's got a shot. We think OJ's got a shot. And I remember a couple of years ago when PT got his gambling suspension. And I went to training camp and I asked Mike Vrabel. And I said, are you nervous about the right tackle position? And he said, I'm not nervous. I'm excited to coach him because we got a lot of guys that we think can go in there and play right tackle. We've got Jamarco Jones and we've got Andrew Rupchich, who, by the way, is now guard and socks. We have Andrew Rupchich and we have OJ. And I'm like, OJ? Who is OJ? So then we had to look it up. And it was John Ojukwu, who was an undrafted free agent out of Kansas State. So then the Titans neglect right tackle in free agency in the draft because they know better than me because Bill Callahan will fix it. So they go into the offseason program, and the entire offseason program, PT and Duncan are out, which means OJ is starting at right tackle. They get to training camp, and OJ is getting first-team right tackle reps. Now, maybe practice doesn't mean anything. I don't know. Call me a little old school. But the Titans at right tackle just said, screw it. We're just going to wing it. They took 3 bad players, convinced themselves that they weren't bad. When all the evidence starts to build up that they are bad, now they're in a pickle. And this would be crazy on its merits alone, that the Titans would go in and say, yeah, we'll figure it out at right tackle, and then have it blow up in their face. That would be crazy if that just was a one-off and Brian Callahan's a rookie coach, and so they're figuring out. The exact same situation happened to them last year at both tackles. Oh, Andre Dillard, he'll be fine. And they spent all of last year swap and spit between him and Duncan. PT, he'll be fine. So while, again, I don't think John Ojukwu is an NFL caliber player, I think the reliance they had on him speaks to their inability to truly construct a roster. Let's just call it how it is. The Titans don't have a clue. And every time they tell you that they have a clue, you start to believe it because you want your team to be well run, but it's not. They bungled the right tackle spot. And here we are today, and it's between PT, who we know is awful, Duncan, who has been awful every opportunity he gets, and the guy who played over Duncan last week just got cut. Get a clue. Is it really that complicated? Is it really that hard to figure out right tackle? The Ravens, again, a smart team, the Ravens traded away their right tackle, Morgan Moses. It was a 4th-round pick swap with the Jets. What did they do? They drafted a guy in the 2nd round. But not here. Because here, Bill Callahan can take the same group of crap bums that Mike Vrabel couldn't get anything out of, and you guys thought, oh, this will be fine. And that's okay. You're entitled to think that. You're allowed to think that. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is them thinking that. And so here we are in week 5. The Titans still don't have a right tackle. Brian Callahan's still not ready to say that PT's the starter. And they just cut a guy that, again, they spent the offseason saying, no, we can rely on this guy. And you guys want to tell me that this team knows what it's doing? You guys want to tell me this team is well constructed? This roster is well constructed? You guys want to tell me you don't need a right tackle? Go put on the Packer film. See what that looks like. That's the frustrating part for me. Is, again, every single roadblock that was put up, every excuse that was given about the tackle position, oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine, it'll be fine, it'll be fine, has proven to be wrong. And they should have known better. And the fact that they didn't know better is incredibly disturbing. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Speaking of disturbing, there is something that for 2 years I had to hear you guys wag your fingers and tell me was totally not the Titans' fault. And seems like it might be the Titans' fault. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106 through the game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3. The Game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So I hate to be the guy that's got to bring this up, but did anybody see how the Baltimore Ravens saved their season on Sunday in overtime after the Bengals dropped the field goal attempt and they missed it? And all of a sudden, Baltimore's got a shot, next score wins, and they hand the ball to Derrick Henry, who rumbles ahead for 50 yards, and right then and there, they're in field goal range, and they make it. In fact, as I was watching Derrick Henry run with the ball, I was thinking to myself, this kind of reminds me of the 2020 game where the Titans beat the Ravens in overtime because Derrick Henry had about a 50-yard house call. Was kind of hoping Derrick was going to walk it off. I was a little disappointed he didn't. But I think it goes to show you that for all the talk over the last couple of years about can't win with a running back, Derrick Henry still seems to win football games. With all the talk we had around here about how Derrick Henry is washed, you got to admit, Jared, he's not the king anymore. You have to admit he's not the same. Where are the big 80-yard touchdown runs, Jared? What happened to Derrick Henry? Well, I'd say after watching him take out Buffalo with an 88-yarder and watching him take out Cincinnati with a 50-yarder, you'd probably say to yourself, Derrick Henry probably still has it. It probably wasn't Derrick Henry. It was probably us. I hate to say it. I laugh every time somebody says you can't win with a running back when it comes to Derrick Henry. For years, the Titans were every bit the AFC contender that Buffalo, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Baltimore were from about 2019 to 2022. The Titans were every bit the contenders those teams were. I mean, they went on the road to Kansas City and almost beat them with Malik Willis at quarterback, for crying out loud. But every time the Titans would lose a game, we'd hear, can't win with a running back. But nobody ever talks about the fact that Josh Allen's never gotten past the AFC Championship game. Lamar Jackson's never gotten past the AFC Championship game. We never hear can't win with Josh Allen, right? But again, for 2 years, Derrick Henry didn't look like the same Derrick Henry in 2021 before he got hurt. Didn't look like the same Derrick Henry that ran for 2,000 yards. Didn't look like the same Derrick Henry that won a rushing title and carried you to the AFC title game. He's washed. We need to move on. Yeah. Who's getting the last laugh now? If you had a marriage, and let's say things went well, not all marriages end poorly. But if you had a marriage, and after 5 years of marriage or 8 years of marriage or however long it ends up being, you two go your separate ways, and she starts dating Tom Cruise, albeit not the crazy side of Tom Cruise. She starts dating Brad Pitt. Let's use that. That's probably better. She starts dating Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio, and you can't get anyone on Tinder to go out with you. Maybe you're the problem. Again, the Titans didn't really have the ability to keep Derrick Henry per se because they couldn't franchise tag him since they had already done it before. And it was obvious listening to his Bussin' with the Boys interview that Derrick Henry probably didn't want to stick around here. But I also get the vibe that the Titans didn't really try. I get the vibe that when it came to Derrick Henry and the Titans, that the Titans wanted to move on. That the Titans thought Derrick Henry was aging. That the Titans thought you couldn't win led by a running back, even though the only winning they've done lately was with him. And I think it's probably pretty obvious that they wanted to move on from Derrick Henry, considering that it is widely reported that the general manager tried to trade him last year. Again, they can say, yeah, we've had some talks with Derrick, but, it's, but did they really? Again, they let Derrick Henry leave. Derrick Henry wanted to go to a contender. He goes to a contender, and what's he doing? He's carrying that contender. You can say, well, they've got Lamar Jackson, and they do. But who delivered the game-winning run on Sunday? Derrick. Who ran for 199 against the Bills? Derrick. Again, I think when Rand Carthon got here, which happens a lot of the time, we call it MGS, my guy syndrome. These guys show up to teams and they say, I got to have my guy. I want to build my roster with my guys, my way, my this, my that. They didn't want Derrick Henry, just like they didn't want Kevin Byard. They knew they couldn't just get rid of Derrick Henry. They tried to trade Derrick Henry, and then in the offseason, they just let Derrick Henry go. Again, you guys told me he was washed. And I think there was a part of the Titans that thought his best days were behind him. But now that Derrick has gone to a competent organization that doesn't draft bad guards with the 11th overall pick, he all of a sudden looks like King Henry again. That's not an accident. Again, new coach comes in. He wants to throw the ball, dynamic running backs. We're going to show them blah, 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 blah. I kept saying this through the offseason. You don't get better by losing Derrick Henry. The Titans spent all this money, according to you guys. Again, their payroll's still like in the top half of the league, or in the bottom half of the league. But the Titans spent all this money, you guys tell me. Jared, we have to be better this year. But you don't get better losing Derrick Henry. I kept saying it over and over and over again. I kept saying at the end of last year, extend Derrick Henry. Extend Derrick Henry. He will help the young quarterback by taking pressure off of him with the 8 and 9 man boxes. No, Jared, we need to be more dynamic. We need to throw the ball. We need to. Okay. But I'd say the Titans have a leadership void right now. Their best player, the guy that, again, they present to us as our team captain, can't get a sack to save his life and spent half of training camp apologizing for going crazy about nothing. Boy, that's my team leader right there. When things were bad, the Titans used to turn to guys like Derrick Henry and Kevin Byard. Those guys were always steady-handed. Those guys never said the wrong thing. When did Derrick Henry ever say anything that caused any sort of controversy around here? Never. So with a young team, or at least a team that you thought was going to be young with a young quarterback, instead of keeping the team's leader, instead of keeping the best player on the team, instead of keeping the guy who showed you in the last game of the year against Jacksonville that he still had it, the Titans decided we can't win with Derrick Henry. It's time to move on. And I understand all good things come to an end. But isn't it a little disappointing that for 2 years we had to discuss, we had to argue, we had to say, oh, is it the line? Is it Derrick? Well, you got to admit he's not the same. Well, he's getting older. Well, he's only to go watch him look like the exact same Derrick Henry somewhere else. This is where I keep going back to how the Titans build their teams. They're poorly constructed. That's why the Titans are bad. Because they're poorly constructed. They value the wrong things. And then when it comes to evaluating, they do it poorly. They probably evaluated it the same way you did. Well, Tony Pollard can catch the ball better, and we're going to throw the ball more, and we need to throw the ball more. And Derrick's 30, and it looks like he's slowing up. Yeah, because he's playing behind the worst offensive line in the NFL. The Ravens, by the way, don't have the best offensive line in the NFL. I believe they were 14th last week, according to Pro Football Focus. And yet, there goes Derrick Henry It's amazing, too, right? When Derrick Henry had a solid left tackle in Taylor Lewan, a solid left guard in Roger Saffold, a solid center in Big Jones, even when they were kind of playing musical right tackle between Conklin and Kelly and Quessenberry, he still ran like a Hall of Famer. Again, the packets that the Titans would send out would talk about what upcoming feats certain players were about to reach. With another interception, Kevin Byard can tie Michael Griffin in the franchise record books. With another 87 yards, Derrick Henry can join O.J. Simpson, Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, Jim Brown, and LaDainian Tomlinson as the 7th back in NFL. You see what I'm saying? But again, we can't ever admit the truth until it's too late. Right now, we finally can admit that the Titans don't have a right tackle. But the problem is, it's too late. Last year, it took us half the season, but we could finally admit that Aaron Brewer was terrible. And then it was too late. Guys, the Titans do not get better by getting rid of good players. And yet they did it. I think it was approved by the fans. And there's Derrick living his best life. And there's you. Underdogs at home against Indianapolis this week. Talking about Shedeur Sanders and Jalen Milroe. Who'd you rather be right now? So can we all admit he's not washed? Can we all admit that you're the problem? Because again, the first step of resolving a problem is recognizing the problem. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. 615-737-1025. A lot of people want to weigh in on this. Plus, a couple of Derrick Henry facts and figures here. I'm sure you'll love to hear it. We'll do that next. Stillman & Company, 1025, 106 through the game.
Nope, he missed it. Wide left. And the Ravens are alive. It's a 1st and 10. Here comes Henry. Ricard a block. Here he goes. Rocketing down the sideline. Breaks a tackle. Down to the 5. Galloping 51 yards. Now Tucker will try to win it. A 24-yarder. The Ravens have won 3 consecutive games. And they do it on the road. And Lamar Jackson goes to 9-1 against the Bengals.
51 yards for Derrick Henry to set up the game-winning score. Here's some other Derrick Henry tidbits out there. And this is going to sound like I'm being mean. I'm not. I'm keeping it real. Because for far too long over the last couple of years, you guys didn't want to keep it real. You wanted to say, Derrick's not the same Derrick. We need to move on. We need to. You kept saying it. And I kept saying, no, you don't get better losing Derrick Henry. The Ravens are number 1 in the NFL in total offense. The Titans are 30th. The Ravens are number 1 in rushing offense. Derrick Henry is number 1 in the NFL in rushing yards per game with 114. Derrick Henry is number 1 in the NFL in rushing yards. And the Ravens average 6.1 yards per rushing attempt in the NFL. Ian, you want to take a guess where that ranks? Number 1.
Okay.
The top. Yeah, he's washed. But hey, you know what? Let Rand cook. You guys this offseason spent all that money only to let the best player in the league at his position, which he clearly still is, go to another team for $1 million less. Or I guess go to another team for $1 million more. You're paying $8 million this year for Tony Pollard. They're paying $9 million for Derrick. Anybody else have a problem with that? Or is it just me? Because again, I don't think that Derrick's best fit is with the Ravens. I think Derrick's best fit would have been with the Cowboys or the Chiefs. But you can't spend all that time telling me that Derrick Henry was washed and Derrick Henry was no good and Derrick Henry was, when Derrick Henry is leading the league in almost every rushing category known to man. And he's got 300 more rushing yards this year than the guy that you replaced him with. That's not good. And I feel like with each embarrassing situation the Titans find themselves in, more and more people are starting to realize, like, yeah, it's a lot of talk and it's not a lot of chalk around here. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com, 615-737-1025. Nehemiah is up next here on Derrick Henry. Thank you for calling. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Yeah, how you doing, Jerry? I think he was playing possum. I mean, we should have known better when on Instagram he was taking all these pictures with Lamar. And I'm thinking, why not play possum, save your energy, and not get hurt and go to a better team? That's what I think he was doing.
You don't think Derrick Henry gave it 100% every time he got on the field?
Nah, he was getting shoelace tackled too much. I mean, I'm in the house screaming, my whole family. Every time he goes through the line, he's sugarfooting through the line, man. And I think that he was doing it on purpose. I think he was just trying to save his energy, save his momentum and all his good years left for Lamar Jackson. That's what I think he was doing.
Nehemiah, you may be a very smart man, but that is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. Thank you for your call. The idea that Derrick Henry was not giving 100% for the Titans is laughable. And quite frankly, I think it's offensive to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is one of the hardest workers, one of the greatest team players that the Titans have ever had. Like, I can tell you right now that Bruce Matthews, Houston promo he did last week, you ain't ever going to see Derrick Henry do that. Because Derrick Henry does everything the right way. If it came out that Derrick Henry, for instance, if it came out that Derrick Henry got busted for steroids, I would be floored. I would be shocked. And not a lot shocks me in sports anymore. And if Derrick Henry got busted for steroids, people would say, well, I mean, Jared, look at him. Like, come on now. And I would say, that's because Derrick Henry doesn't take shortcuts. Derrick Henry doesn't cheat. And the idea of Derrick Henry going out on the field and not giving 100%, to me, what I know of Derrick Henry, and I know Derrick, I mean, I don't know him that well, but I know him. That Derrick Henry, he doesn't do that. Derrick's not going to cheat his football team. If Derrick Henry's out there, Derrick Henry's trying to win. That's why you want Derrick Henry on your team. This idea that Derrick Henry was not giving 100% is ridiculous. One texter says, make sure to mention, Jared, that Derrick Henry also has Lamar Jackson. I can mention that, and I'm sure it doesn't hurt. But when the guy did the exact same thing with Ryan Tannehill, it kind of tells me that Derrick's ability is independent of who's playing quarterback with him. I mean, that 2018 Titans team, Marcus Mariota couldn't even throw the ball at the end of the year. And Derrick Henry, for the last 4 games of the year, when Matt LaFleur finally realized, nah, I don't want to be one of these guys that throws it up and down the yard all the time because I don't have the personnel to be able to do that. I need to run the ball. The same thing Brian Callahan's going through right now. And he started giving it Derrick. They started winning games. If you can run like the best running back in the league with Mariota, Tannehill, and Lamar Jackson, then it ain't just Lamar Jackson. It's you. So this idea, some of you people out there, it's, whew. One texter into the text line goes, you talk about it as if Derrick Henry wasn't the second overall leading rusher last year. I mean, again, it's like these things don't matter, though. Like they weren't winning, so it was all Vrabel's fault, and we need to start over, and we need it, and all of a sudden you do these things, and you get worse, and Derrick Henry is leading the Ravens back into contention. Ron says, would Derrick Henry be leading the NFL behind our offensive line? Well, again, the difference was $1 million. So I'm not saying Derrick would have stayed for the same amount of money. But I did say, like, I'd give Derrick a 2-year deal and I'd give him $10 million a year. And I'd make sure Derrick Henry knew, like, hey, man, you're the leader of this team. And I don't know if the Titans offered that or not. I tend to doubt it, considering that they tried to give him up for a 4th-round pick last year. But just because you get Derrick Henry or keep Derrick Henry doesn't mean that you don't need to get better players around him. But yeah, I think Derrick Henry would still be running the ball pretty well, even behind this offensive line. Tony Pollard's running the ball okay behind this offensive line. And Tony Pollard's a good player. And Tony Pollard should be treated like DeMarco Murray was when he was the running back here and they gave him the ball all the time. But he's not Derrick Henry. One texter says, Derrick Henry wanted to get away from the Titans and no one can blame him. Agreed. But is that a good place to be? Where the best player at his position in the NFL, the best player in the history of the Tennessee franchise, the Tennessee portion of the franchise, is like, Lord, let me get out of here. And he does, he leaves, and he's all of a sudden right back to the top. Is that a good thing to have, your best player wanting to get out of town? I mean, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about when it comes to Derrick Henry. One texter says, Derrick Henry only had 31 yards on 11 carries before that 50-yarder. Yeah, and when it mattered most, who came through? Derrick, because that's what great players do. Again, Derrick Henry keeps showing you that he's a great player. He's still a great player. And for whatever reason, I don't know what it is, but everybody around here has always wanted to poo-poo it. And it's, again, keep doing that and you're going to continue to suck. Keep making excuses, keep inadequately evaluating your team, and you're going to continue to be 30th in the league in total offense. I mean, so the same guys that are telling me Will Levis can turn it over all the time and it's okay are the same guys that told me we need to move on from Derrick Henry, and I'm supposed to be okay with that? Does anybody else have a problem with that, or is it just me? 615-737-1025 here on our program. Chase wants to weigh in next here on our show. Chase, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Jared? Just listening to the caller that said he was playing possum. I felt like Titans fans were like down on Derrick Henry late in the season last year. And so the verbiage was, well, if he has a good game against Jacksonville, then we'll re-sign him. But if he doesn't, we'll let him walk. Well, I mean, the guy tore it up against Jacksonville. So he had a good game, and we still let him walk for a 4th-round pick. And I don't even know who we drafted in the 4th round this year, but I know they're not helping us.
You didn't get a 4th-round pick for Derrick Henry. You got nothing for Derrick Henry.
Nothing, but we tried to get a 4th round, which tells me they weren't going to re-sign him. So why would Derrick Henry play possum to not expected to get offered a decent value? That's just the most idiotic thing I've ever heard in my life.
Sure. I mean, I think that's a great point. What's the market rate for running backs that don't try hard? It's not very big. And Chase, thank you. And I agree. And on top of it, again, it just goes against every fiber within Derrick Henry's body. But keep making excuses. It'll make you feel better. 615-737-1025. Vanderbilt shocks the world. Trevor joins us next with his reaction. And what's wrong with Nico? How worried should we be? Trevor Maddich joins us next on the program. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Those are my guys. They were out at my home last week. They fixed the garbage disposal. They fixed another drain. They just do it all. It's spooky season, and everyone's thinking about Halloween. And this month, it's all treats and no tricks with my friends at Hiller. During their spooky good fall giveaway, get a free Blackstone griddle, free Solo stove, or Yeti Tundra cooler with select home upgrades. Or enjoy $99 specials like an HVAC tune-up. Visit happyhiller.com today for all the details. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today. So Vanderbilt shocked the world on Saturday. I got to tell you that when we had Trevor Maddich on the program and I knew we were going to be talking college ball, the first thing I had to ask him was, Trevor, I'm going to put you on the spot. Was Saturday more about Vanderbilt winning or Alabama losing, in your opinion? Go. By the way, Trevor Maddich is presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, your thoughts?
It's more about Vanderbilt winning. Vanderbilt outplayed Alabama in the trenches on the defensive side of the ball. In other words, Vanderbilt's offensive line against Alabama's defensive front. Vanderbilt outcoached Alabama in this game, especially in that matchup. Vanderbilt's offense, Alabama's defense. Vanderbilt didn't make the big mistake. Alabama made 3, really. 2 turnovers and then a penalty at a terrible time that extended a drive that ended in a touchdown for Vandy. And Vandy took advantage of every one of those mistakes. And ultimately, a lot of people think that that Alabama had a hangover because of that big win against Georgia, and that they didn't take Vandy seriously. I don't think they had a hangover. I think they did not take Vandy seriously. But once they got hit in the mouth, Vandy scored touchdowns on each of their first 2 drives and got that pick 6 in between those for 3 quick touchdowns. Once that happened, Alabama was fully awake. Now what did they do? And the Alabama offense was able to move the ball and score tons of points. But the Alabama defense could not get Vandy off the field. And they had their first drive for Vanderbilt, 10 plays, touchdown. Their next drive, offensive drive, 17 plays, touchdown. And this is the way it went all through the game. And this is where Vandy outplayed Alabama's defense and outcoached Alabama's defense. And Alabama's defense was fully awake, by the time we got to the second quarter. And while the Vandy was running 75 plays, the Alabama offense only ran 45. And so Bama scored when they got it. They just didn't get it very much. And those 2 turnovers were really the daggers, because those turned into 2 Vanderbilt touchdowns. So you put it all together, and Vanderbilt beat Alabama. And the reason is that Vanderbilt's offense beat Alabama's defense, rendering Alabama's offense largely irrelevant.
Trevor, is Vanderbilt good? I know they lost at Georgia State, but I watched that game. Pavia gave them a lead with about 1:14 to go, and the defense couldn't hold. And I think Clark Lee kind of hinted at it today when he said, just as we showed on Saturday, we can beat anybody. When we don't play up to our standard, we can lose to anybody. And then they went to double overtime on the road at Missouri. Now, Missouri got exposed against A&M, but it's not like Missouri's a bad team. They've beaten Virginia Tech. They've beaten Alabama. With Pavia at quarterback, is Vandy a good team?
Vandy is a good team on offense because Pavia is at quarterback. He is a baller. He makes plays on schedule, but when things tend to break down, he is fantastic at making something happen. I mean, he had a touchdown pass where he threw sidearm around an Alabama defender coming up to pressure him, touchdown. Then at the end of the game, in that final drive, when they ran out the clock, he had a key pass, sidearm around an Alabama defender. I mean, just things like that he does to make plays even when the defense creates an advantage for itself are really hard to beat. And so having that kind of a quarterback is huge. Defensively, they are still very much a work in progress. Remember, Bama only ran 45 plays, but they put up 35 points in 45 plays. So, are
I asked Clark Lee, I said, how do you carry the momentum of the game and everything else? Because clearly it took over the city, what they did on Saturday by beating Alabama. Everybody was getting into it. And when I asked that question, I knew what the answer was. There's a whole marketing element of this, which right now is kind of in a different department. They got to beat Kentucky. And yet, even though they beat Alabama, even though they went to double overtime with Missouri, even though they beat Virginia Tech, who, I watched Virginia Tech play Miami, and I thought Virginia Tech won that game. And, well, again, I'm not going to sit here and say that things are rigged just because they didn't get the result I thought should happen. I did kind of think that was a disingenuous overturn by the ACC officials. But they're a 14-point dog on the road this week at Kentucky. I don't understand that, Trevor.
Well, it's because Kentucky is a more complete team. And keep in mind that
But is Kentucky good?
Kentucky has ability. I mean, their defense shut down Georgia's offense, held them to 13 points. And then Kentucky's defense shut down Ole Miss's offense, beating Ole Miss. Ole Miss only managed 17 points. They only scored 2 touchdowns against Kentucky. So this will be a defense that'll be another really big challenge for Pavia. Just because they ran up and down on Alabama doesn't mean that they're going to do that to every single defense. I mean, there were just so many plays where the scheme allowed for an easy recognition, an easy throw, and an easy catch, and Alabama's defense was just schooled by the scheme that by the play calling that Vanderbilt did. So Kentucky's tough. Now Kentucky's offense nowhere near as good as Alabama's, but it doesn't need to be, because once again the Vandy defense is not the strength of the team. So I think they'll run into a much more difficult obstacle with Kentucky's D than they did Alabama's D. Not that Kentucky's more talented than Alabama, but certainly because they're playing a lot better than Alabama played against Vandy.
Trevor Maddox, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. On the other side of this, Alabama fans are furious at Kalen DeBoer. I listened to the callers to the Paul Feinbaum show yesterday. They're not very happy. There's an article in the Alabama paper today about how Kalen DeBoer wears a T-shirt on the sideline. They don't like it. They want the polo back that Nick Saban used to wear. Nick Saban's not walking through that door. And at the same time, when I look at Kalen DeBoer, I recognize the fact that he is, I believe, 108-13 as a head coach. That's not an accident. Washington was in the championship game. And yet at the same time, Trevor, I went and watched the Monday press conference after the Georgia game. Kalen DeBoer did not mention Vanderbilt one time. He did not talk about the game on Saturday. He basically held a second post-game press conference to talk about the Georgia game. That is something Nick Saban would have never done in a million years. So I am wondering, can Kalen DeBoer handle the heat, and how much heat is there? Because, they lost to Vandy.
Well, there's a lot of heat. I mean, there's a ton of heat for all the reasons that you mentioned. I mean, the expectations in the sense of entitlement of Alabama's fans, entitlement to championships, entitlement to seasons where they might lose one, but then they're going to win either the conference or the national championship. That's the expectation. And Kalen DeBoer has actually done a really good job with this team. I mean, he is a winner, like you mentioned. He's won everywhere he's been. He's got a different style from Nick Saban. And if they had won this game, if they beat South Carolina the next week and they start out 6-0 before they come to Tennessee, I mean, that T-shirt that they're criticizing now, everybody would be paying $40 for a T-shirt like that. It's like, what a great change, it's the T-shirt. And that might be his nickname, the T-shirt, and it would be a super positive thing. Right now, Alabama fans are looking for any picky thing that they can say is wrong here. And they lost to Vanderbilt. They shouldn't have. Their defense got housed. In part, it was because Vandy just outplayed them. But Alabama's got a lot more talent there. So what does that mean now going forward? Is Kalen DeBoer not the guy? Is he an inadequate replacement for Saban? The answer to all those questions are DeBoer is the right guy. Of all the coaches that were available of all the coaches that Bama could have gotten, that they actually could have gotten, because they weren't going to get Steve Sarkisian from Texas, for example.
Sure. Or Danny Lanning.
Right. Out of Oregon. So, but people talked about Lane Kiffin. Don't know if that's really the right fit there. And then Kalen DeBoer. And as soon as they announced that Kalen DeBoer was the coach, I went, okay, that's the guy. It's going to be great. And the thing is, it will be just fine. I mean, right now, or last I checked a week or two ago, Alabama had the number 2 recruiting class for this upcoming cycle. So recruits are believing in it. Parents are believing in it. The players that are there are believing in it in a major way. And so I don't think that any of this, I think it's fine for the callers into Paul Feinbaum and for Alabama fans to be up in arms and completely upset. That's who they are. That passion is one of the reasons Alabama is what it is. But I don't think it's reasonable to say that, therefore, Kalen DeBoer is not the guy. I think Kalen DeBoer is going to be great. I want to see how they come back from this loss and how well they play. But I think overall, He's a guy that is going to take Alabama right back to the heights of competing for championships.
Trevor, do you think we're going to see what Vanderbilt's done with more teams now that NIL and transfer portal and money, and we know the gap between the haves and the have-nots when it comes to the SEC and the ACC, and that's why Florida State and Clemson want out, where Vanderbilt just went to New Mexico State and said, hey, you got an offense we like, we'll buy it. Do you think we're going to see more of that, where, say, a defensive coach, a la Clark Lee, but maybe a Kirby Smart one day, just says, you know what, right now, Carson Beck's gone to the NFL, let's just go buy somebody's offense? Or do you think this is kind of like a special situation Vanderbilt has going on?
I think that it'll be a lot like it is now, which is to say you'll have teams building a foundation with their own recruits, and then they will bring in transfers and they'll buy those transfers to bring in some star power in certain places, to bring in depth in certain places. You've got two extremes on that. Dabo Swinney of Clemson is criticized for not wanting to use the portal, right? And so they don't get many, and they don't lose many. He wants to develop his homegrown people, let it be a family, let it be guys that have been in the program for several years, are their key players. The opposite of that is Deion Sanders at Colorado, where he'll bring in 50 guys. He doesn't like them. He'll bring in 50 new ones the next year. And I think where it's going to end up is somewhere in the middle. And what Vandy did, what Miami did at the quarterback position, I think is the best example of what can be done. I don't think you can bring in too many transfers and count on them to develop into a cohesive whole, especially when there is adversity. Because when you just have hired gunslingers coming in and there's adversity, they don't have a connection to those teammates in the locker room. They don't have a connection to the university. I mean, look at what happened at UNLV. They were undefeated. They were ranked for the first time in their history, and their starting quarterback left the team because he says that he wasn't given the NIL money that was promised to him. Now, there's some dispute as to what was and wasn't promised. The point is, the guy that came in over the summer this year as a transfer quarterback left the team a month and a half into the season because he had no connection to the team. He only had connection to the money. So you've got to be careful about being too reliant on the portal for reasons of culture and commitment. But look at what's happened with Vanderbilt now with Pavia. I don't know how many more games they're going to win, but they're going to be fun to watch. Look at what happened in Miami. They've developed a good core roster, but have not put together the quarterback position for many years. And then they got Cam Ward to transfer from Washington State to Miami. And I think these are at Michigan, for goodness sake. Do you think Michigan would like Diego Pavia right now or
Sure.
Cam Ward right now? How about Florida State? They chose DJ Uiagalelei, and that didn't work out. Would they like Cam Ward or Diego? And so, this is where you've got to be careful about thinking that the portal is the end-all, be-all to fixing all problems. The portal fixes some problems, and it finishes a roster, but you've got to be careful about the culture because it still is important.
Trevor Maddox is with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters, here on the program. What happened to Nico in the Vols? We'll get into that with Trev next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Iamaleava. This is going to be the last play of the game. Scrambles and is shoved out of bounds. No time left. Arkansas pulls the upset.
Last play for all the poise that Nico has. He's sort of lost track of the situation there, Kirk, with the clock winding down.
Yeah, but remember I talked about the three defensive backs. They kept these three back to take away any of the vertical shots, and then they had the underneath tight coverage. He's trying to get the ball to the left here to 19, stays. Watch how he's looking that way initially, and he comes off of it. That's just look at his head. Looks. Now he's got to try to make a play. There's no one open downfield. So now he's thinking, somebody work with me. Somebody work with me.
Got to let it go, though.
Yeah, there's nobody there. Yeah, of course, you got to let it go. Young guy lets it just kind of, he was so locked in on that left side. There's nowhere to go with the ball. And, yeah, you should throw it up, give somebody a chance. But he's a young guy. He'll learn from it. But really, this is about Arkansas. It's about what they did at home tonight, pulling off this upset.
Herbie! I think Arkansas stinks. And I was very disappointed by the Vols on Saturday night. Trevor Maddich is presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, what's wrong with Nico, Josh Heupel, and the Vols? What the hell happened on Saturday?
There's nothing wrong with them. I mean, Nico's a young guy, Chris and Kirk were talking about. And he has a lot to learn still about the craft of quarterbacking. Guys will come up through high school and through even junior high and all the 7-on-7 camps and all the rest of it. And when they're physically superior, they think that quarterbacking is throwing and completing passes, but there's a whole lot more to it. As we saw on that last play of the game where nobody was open, but he wasn't going to run it in. So they would have a better chance if he just threw it up to somebody and let him go up and try to make a play, or at least maybe get a pass interference penalty. Low percentage of success, but higher percentage of success than keeping the ball and running out of bounds, right? So these are things that he'll learn. What happened against Arkansas, two things. First of all, Arkansas was Tennessee's best test of the season. They were the most complete team Tennessee has played. We thought NC State would be that team, but NC State
better than Oklahoma?
No, yeah, Arkansas better than Oklahoma. That's right. Arkansas has lost 2 games this year. They lost to Oklahoma State and Texas A&M. They outgained both of those opponents and really dominated them on the stat line for the most part. But they had 3 turnovers in each of those losses, and there were critical turnovers in critical places on the field, and that's why they lost those games. So it's not like they got blown out. I mean, this Arkansas team is very good on both sides of the ball. Oklahoma's defense, very good. Oklahoma's offense, epic injuries. I mean, their top 5 wide receivers were out there on their 4th center. And so the offense wasn't really a threat. The defense was, though. And what Tennessee did on offense against Oklahoma was to protect the young quarterback. They only threw it 21 times. They ran it like 52 times. And that kept the defense from zeroing in on Nico in the pocket. Even so, Nico fumbled the ball in the pocket twice, lost both fumbles. Think about that. 21 dropbacks, 2 fumbles lost. And so it was smart of them to protect him, because there's a lot going on in a hostile road environment like that Nico will get used to. So what happened in this game against Arkansas? They weren't able to get any big plays. They scored 2 touchdowns, Tennessee did. One of them featured a drive with a 53-yard Dylan Sampson run that set up the touchdown at the end of that drive. The other one, Arkansas helped him out with a personal foul penalty and then a roughing the passer penalty 2 plays later, and that helped to get Tennessee down into scoring range, and Tennessee scored. Other than that, Tennessee didn't score in this game. They had a 42-yard pass play to get them down into scoring position on that last drive, but then it petered out as the clock ran out. So in protecting Nico, they weren't able to get the big play going. But a lot of that, too, was Arkansas's defense, because Arkansas's defense is very physical, and they hit Tennessee in the mouth. I think Tennessee's offense is legit. I think their defense is legit. But this is a case where, like Kirk said, Arkansas on both sides of the ball were more physical, and they had their act together. They were more wired tight, and they were a more difficult matchup for Tennessee than anybody else Tennessee played. And in this situation, what the Volunteers needed was a quarterback to overcome that by making plays down the field anyway. And Nico, at this stage in his career, wasn't able to get that done in this game.
Trevor, one thing that really bothered me, I understand Nico running out of bounds at the end of the game, and I thought that was a horrible mistake. But Tennessee throws a 42-yard pass on that final drive with 35 seconds to go in the ball game. Josh Heupel doesn't call a timeout, and they lost about 20 seconds or so, even though the clock stops when the chains move. I was really disappointed in Josh Heupel because I think there's too much to expect a rookie quarterback to be able to do in that instance. Do you think Heupel, am I wrong for saying Heupel should have burned one of the 2 timeouts he had, even with the clock stopped because of the chains moving, given how little time there was in the game and given the fact that he had a young quarterback on the road? Or is that something that we should expect Nico to be able to manage better?
Well, there's a third possibility, and that is you strike deep. The defense is thinking, oh no, they just hit a big play. You are running down to try to run the next play before the defense can get their wits about them. That's why you do that. So you don't call timeout, let the defense gather itself. You run down there, you run a play. And one of the things that has generated so many big plays for Tennessee under Josh Heupel is by going tempo. And tempo might mean a short gain, get right up to the line and boom, big game, or big game, run all the way down the field, run another play, touchdown, right, before the defense can get set. So that's a third possibility. And as I was watching it, that's what I thought Heupel was thinking as he was trying to manage that last part. They let too much time run off the clock. It didn't work out very well, but I understand the thought process.
Trevor, Texas is undefeated, so let's put them to the side. Missouri, Ole Miss, UT, Bama, Georgia, and A&M. Who's good, who's not?
A&M's good. They lost that opener against Notre Dame. Probably should have won that game. But then they're undefeated since. And they're undefeated with their backup quarterback, Marcel Reed, because the starter, Connor Wegman, got hurt, missed the last 3 games. Reed has been very good as a runner, not so much as a passer. Wegman came back in this last game against Missouri and was brilliant throwing the ball. And if he continues that, their running game is good enough and their defense is good enough for them to be a real threat to get to the SEC championship game. Missouri, I wonder about, because they also, like Tennessee, had not been really tested before they went down to play Texas A&M. And Texas A&M hit him in the mouth on both sides of the ball. And the defense of Missouri, which had been performing statistically at an elite level, couldn't stop the run. And when they came up to load the box, they couldn't stop the big run from happening, because then there's only one safety or no safeties back there. And once the running back of A&M broke through the first level, there was no one to stop the jailbreak, and they couldn't stop the passing. So it was the balance of A&M that showed that Missouri's defense, statistically great, but has some problems they have to deal with. I think A&M is growing to a point where they're a real threat. And the thing I like best about them is that under Jimbo Fisher, their prior coach, there were all kinds of flash and, big high-profile recruits and lots of NIL and everything else, and they didn't seem to come together as a team. And then all the big NIL guys started leaving. They came in, and then they left. Well, you didn't hear much about Texas A&M this offseason because Mike Elko, the new head coach, just got down to work. It was just blue collar. There was no big flashy stuff. And they are playing like that now. I think A&M is a team to watch.
So you would say they're the second best team in the SEC behind Texas right now?
I think they are a threat to be that. I still think Alabama is really, really good. Georgia's really good. Tennessee's really good. Ole Miss, really good. I mean, this is still a deep league, and I don't want to overreact to some of the losses and struggles they've had over the last couple of weeks.
Okay, Trev, I'm going to ask you this question. I've asked this to pretty much everybody whose opinion I care about. So, the cartel has your family, and you have to win one NFL game tomorrow. And the only 2 options at quarterback are Diego Pavia or Will Levis. Who are you taking to be your quarterback to save your family from the cartel?
Well, Diego Pavia.
Thank
I
you.
think Diego Pavia protects the ball better. Diego Pavia has better instincts. Diego Pavia has a better feel for what's happening in front of him. And that's part of the art of quarterbacking that Will Levis, as an NFL quarterback, is still trying to develop.
Trevor Maddox, bring in the heat. Oh, you had it now. Go with your now.
Pavia still has to show he can do it for the rest of this season in the SEC and show he can do it in the NFL. This is speculation on there, but even at the college level, Pavia shows better instincts than Levis did.
Thank you. Well said, Trevor. Thank you very much. As always, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Great stuff, Trev.
Thanks, Jared.
Speaking of Will Levis, we've kind of had this where everybody thinks one thing about the Titans, but then everybody inside the Titan bubble thinks something different. And then usually what everybody else thinks is usually what ends up happening. And there is a situation where everybody else seems to think something that the Titans don't seem to think. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So usually when there's one line of thinking inside Titanville and there's another line of thinking outside of Titanville, chances are the thinking inside of Titanville is wrong and outside of Titanville is usually right. And I'm even guilty of getting this wrong a couple of years ago when the Titans ran it back with Henry and Tannehill, and they were 1 foot in and 1 foot out and shotgun marriage of collaboration between Vrabel and Carthon, which ultimately failed, and all of that nonsense. And I thought that team could win 11, 12 games. I mean, I'm like, hey, that team was a fumble away from winning the division with Josh Dobbs at quarterback. They're not going to have the same distractions. The offensive line can't be as bad as it was last year. And everybody else was saying outside of Titanland, yeah, Titans probably going to stink. And they were right, and we were wrong, and the Titans kind of stunk. Well, inside of Titanland, Will Levis is the unquestioned quarterback of the Tennessee Titans, period. The media that covers the Titans, they're all writing articles about why the Titans need to be patient with Will Levis. What Will Levis can do to help himself with the Titans. The coach has said this season is about Will Levis. The fans say this year we got to figure out what we have, as if you don't already know. Meanwhile, outside of Titanland, a lot of people aren't sure Will Levis is going to be the quarterback much longer. Diana Rossini in The Athletic over the weekend, quote, talked to an AFC South coach who said it's only a matter of time before Mason Rudolph takes over. Period. Blake Bedingfield at paulkaharski.com wrote after the Titans win, and again, Blake Bedingfield is the scout who convinced the Titans to draft Derrick Henry, and Blake Bedingfield wrote, quote, the Titans have quarterback issues and will need to figure out a better plan for Levis moving forward. If Levis continues his turnovers and inconsistencies, then the Titans will have no choice but to turn to Mason Rudolph. So inside of Titanland, there is no quarterback controversy. The coach said so. Inside of Titanland, there is no debate as to why Will Levis should be benched or will be benched or if it'll come later in the year or if they'll try. Nothing. And yet, other coaches are telling Diana Rossini, I mean, it's only a matter of time before they sit Will Levis down. And Blake Bedingfield, again, who lives here, Blake Bedingfield saying, I mean, if Levis isn't going to change, and by the way, maybe there's a chance Levis changes, but I think it's probably more likely than not that he doesn't change. He says, if Levis doesn't change, this isn't going to work out. And they're going to have to go to Rudolph. So, again, my spidey sense is telling me that when it comes to Levis, that if everybody outside of Titanland says eventually they're going to switch the quarterbacks, then it is likely that eventually they're going to switch the quarterbacks. Rich Gannon said that if anybody better than Mason Rudolph was there, then they'd probably be quarterback. Rich Gannon also said he thinks the coaches are probably ready to give up on Levis, though I don't know. But again, that takes me back to Titanland, where all anybody in Titanland can say is, this year is about figuring out what Levis is, period. So when it comes to everybody outside of Titanland saying eventually the Titans are going to go to Mason Rudolph, it leads me to ask this question. Why? I don't necessarily care what Brian Callahan says because Will Levis is going to be his guy every single press conference and interview until he's not his guy. There's not going to be a press conference where he gets up there and says, Will's my guy, but Mason's starting this week. That doesn't exist in the NFL. But why are football people so quick to just assume that the Titans won't be willing to lose every single game this season with Levis turning the ball? Possibilities and everything else. Like, I think I'm okay with that. I think I'm going to the game on Sunday. I have tickets to go to the game on Sunday. I think I'm going to end up going. But, like, if I have to sit through the same game that I had to sit through against Green Bay, am I going to like it? No. But if all of the games are like that this season, I'm still not convinced that I'm going to want to see Mason Rudolph play quarterback. Like, what good does that do the Titans? The only point of playing Mason Rudolph is if you just want to win some games this year right now for fun. We don't live in that kind of society anymore. We used to live in that kind of society. Previous generations, there was something about playing for pride that mattered. There was something about honoring your fans and honoring your team and honoring the logo. We don't have that anymore. In college football, all the kids look at the poinsettia bowl and say, pass. So we don't have this society where it's okay to just win a couple of games for no reason, because there's no benefit to that. If you lose every game with Will Levis turning the ball over 26 times this season, which he's on pace to throw 26 interceptions, if you lose every game with him throwing 26 interceptions, you probably get the third pick in the draft. And the value of the third pick is infinitely higher than the value of the eighth pick. So I guess I understand why everybody in Titanland would say Levis is our guy, because there's some hope that Will Levis can do this. There's some hope, given his size, given some of the highlights he's shown, his natural ability, that he can actually be an NFL quarterback. I don't have it, but some people do. And I can understand the idea of, well, you know, Troy Aikman wasn't great right away. And I'm okay with that. But everybody outside of Titanland is telling me, no, they're going to have to change quarterback eventually. And again, normally the people outside of Titanland are right. But in this case, I'm just not sure what good it does. Like, I'm not jonesing to see Mason Rudolph play, no matter how bad Will Levis is. Mike Vrabel's not the coach of this team anymore. The ex-player, we play to win no matter what. So while I get why other coaches and people would think they've got to make a change, I'm not really sure the Titans believe that, because I think that they have the mindset of, hey, if Levis ends up being this awful, we'll get the second pick and we'll do what Washington did, draft Jaden Daniels, and we'll be fine. And I can't say it's the worst line of thinking I've ever heard of, but that does seem to be where we are. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in on that. And again, I'm trying to figure out what the reason to play Mason Rudolph would be. But other than, hey, we want to win some games. We just want to win a couple of games. That's it. Just want to win some games. 615-737-1025. So the Athletic has their rankings for where these quarterbacks rank, where Will Levis ranks after 5 NFL weeks. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Let's talk about Twice Daily. That's right, Twice Daily and White Bison, they are the best. And this time of the year, White Bison knows exactly what you're craving. Pumpkin. So try their pumpkin cookie frappe, their pumpkin spice latte, or their vanilla shaken espresso with pumpkin soft whip. It's irresistible. Plus, White Bison Rewards members get your 8th drink for free. While you're there, check out their sandwiches, wraps, and whatnot, all freshly prepared right when you order. I'm a big White Bison guy. I'm a big Twice Daily guy. They're the best. And for the sweet tooth, try their fresh baked pastries. They go perfectly with premium coffee, expertly prepared by the roast masters. White Bison and Twice Daily, finely crafted for your everyday.
Does his situation kind of put you in a situation where you were in the game, where if things aren't going well and his shoulder could conceivably be a factor, and it gives you a easy way to turn to Mason?
No, I mean, I think if he's good to practice and good to go, then he's going to play. And that's really, unless it's affecting his ability to do his job, I don't think there'll be any discussion on that point. Again, if it still hurts a ton and he's having trouble throwing effectively and all those things, then yeah, that's a whole different conversation. But again, we'll just see how the week of practice goes. But I feel pretty good about where he should be at.
That was Brian Callahan saying if Levis is healthy, he plays. And again, considering that today they released John Ojukwu but haven't signed another quarterback, Levis is probably fine. And Levis will play against the Colts on Sunday. So The Athletic has a quarterback ranking every week. The weekly quarterback ranking. Ian, you'll never guess who number one is.
Mahomes.
Bingo. So they kind of have a weekly stock report. Who's up, who's down, whatever. Will Levis, 31st. 31st. Tyler Huntley is 32nd. Now they have Russell Wilson, Tua, Bryce Young, and Skylar Thompson all not ranked because of their situations. In the case of Russell and Tua, they're noted as injured. And in the case of Bryce Young and Skylar Thompson, I guess they're benched. Here's who's ahead of Levis, according to The Athletic. Jacoby Brissett, who, by the way, has been benched. Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, Anthony Richardson, Gardner Minshew, who they're talking about benching, Andy Dalton, Daniel Jones, Bo Nix, Justin Fields, who they're also thinking about benching. That ain't very good, guys. That's not very good. Now, again, people outside of Titanland think that, again, Coach told Diana Rossini it's only a matter of time until Mason Rudolph is the quarterback. To which I would say, why? Like, why jump the gun? Why? Why do we need Mason Rudolph to be the quarterback? Derek texted me, and he said the reason to make the switch would be because he, talking about Brian Callahan, can't lose the locker room.
A mutiny.
Here's my question. Do you think they care about that? Like, do you think the Titans are sitting around the table when they're having these discussions with Amy and Brinker and Carthon and everybody else, and they're like, if we keep playing this guy and he keeps turning it over, eventually the coach is going to lose the locker room? And part of me thinks these guys aren't smart enough to realize that that could happen. I'm serious. I don't think the Titans think like that. Because I've seen some of the decisions that they've made, and it's so devoid from reality that I think they're just off in la-la land talking about, well, if we lose, then we get the second pick. And think about what we can do with the second pick. Think about the analytics and what we can do with that. And again, Brian Callahan's never been a head coach before. And I do wonder if he knows, like, you know, hey, man, if you lose the team, like, you got to go. I don't care if it's year 1, year 8, year 9, whatever. I don't know if they think like that. I think there's a part of them. And some of this might be because you guys buy so much of their crap when they spew it that they think they can go in the locker room and say, Will's our guy. And they can say, yeah. Not, he's costing us the game. And then I wonder how much these players care about it. You know, Joe was talking about, well, Tony Pollard and Calvin Ridley and those guys, they knew what they signed up for. And there may be some of that, which is, hey, we told you guys when we signed you, we're going to try out this young quarterback. We didn't know he sucked this bad, but it is what it is. But that's a question for Derek. He would know better than I would because, again, he played and I didn't. But sometimes I don't think the Titans think those kind of things through. Kind of like right tackle, which I know they didn't think through. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025. One texter says, sometimes we give coaches too much credit. They're trying to sell you and the fans on the team as well. A bad business owner still tries to convince you that they have the best business around. It's not smart to believe everything the coaches and administration say. And again, I don't believe everything they say. But I do believe Brian Callahan when he says Will Levis is their guy. Like, he's going to say that until he's not. And he hasn't wavered at all. Maybe, I mean, again, I think that Titan land is probably wrong. And I think that, as that AFC South coach told Diana, as Blake Bedingfield wrote at paulkarski.com, I think there's probably a pretty good chance that if things don't change, and I don't have any evidence that would make me think they're going to, then eventually they're going to make a change. And when they make the change, I'll be like, what happened to give Levis time? You guys all bitched about we got to give him time, and they're not giving him time. But I totally think that Brian Callahan is prepared. I don't know when it is. Could be next week, could be 5 weeks from now. But I totally think Brian Callahan at some point is prepared to switch quarterbacks out. I just don't totally see the benefit of it, other than maybe, again, keeping the team. One texter says, we don't get any better by picking 17th in the draft. Bingo. And I'm not a tanker. Like, I'm not a guy who is necessarily pro-tanking. I'm not. But because the Titans have been in really the basement, but not the bottom of it the last couple of years, and it's kept them away from the C.J. Strouds and the Jaden Daniels, and I'll say it, the Anthony Richardsons. I mean, I've been doing a lot of research on the Colts, and we'll talk about the Colts a lot this week. I don't think Anthony Richardson is the problem with Anthony Richardson. I think the Colts, I think they're the problem. I mean, I told you guys I'd take that guy number 1, and I'd go back to that day and do it again. And now, look, C.J. Stroud is a special player. And so, if I was on the clock at number 1, I probably would take C.J. Stroud. But if I was on the clock at 4 in Indy's position, I'd do the exact same thing. The problem is once they drafted him, they've done the exact opposite of everything that I would have done. And, I mean, I talked about it at length about the plan that I thought the Titans should have, and it involved Anthony Richardson not playing year 1. It involved Anthony Richardson handing the ball to Derrick Henry about 25 times a game, or in the Colts case, Jonathan Taylor. So, again, they've done the opposite of what I would do, but that's their business, not mine. I would have signed him a tight end. They keep rolling with Mo Alley Cox. But again, that's their business, not mine. But by, again, winning and picking 9th, you are away from the Jaden Daniels pick, the elite talent picks. And at some point, they need the elite talent pick at quarterback. Because you can't sign Joe Burrow. You can't trade for Patrick Mahomes. You have to draft those guys. And so I'm okay with taking it slow with a young quarterback. But what I'm not okay with is, running a guy out there who in year 2 keeps telling you he's not going to change. That is an issue. 615-737-1025. More of your phones. We got a lot of them on this. Plus, I did hear something yesterday that takes me back to a topic that I have enjoyed over the last couple of days that I think I'd be willing to take a late round shot on. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
it says you're 6 feet. That's give me with your hair. I'm going to give you 6 feet. I don't know. Give me official height and weight here, Diego.
Official height, pro day, I'll be measured at 5'10", 1/8. And my weight, I'll probably be like 204, between 204 and 207.
All right. Could be like Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Super Bowl champion.
Yeah.
That was Diego Pavia on the Dan Patrick Show. So yesterday we did a topic that I was so excited about, thought it was a good topic, about, again, the question is, if the cartel has your family and you've got to win an NFL game, and the only two choices at quarterback are Will Levis or Diego Pavia, who are you taking? And by my count, my straw poll, Jared is Diego Pavia. Robbie Stanley is Diego Pavia. Caroline Fenton is Diego Pavia. Trevor Maddich is Diego Pavia. Chad Withrow is Diego Pavia. And Ian Safar is Will Levis. Ian, how's it feel?
I feel okay.
So Diego Pavia says on his pro day he's going to measure at 5'10". What does that tell us? Even though he's listed at 6 foot, he's going to measure at 5'10". Which, again, Kyler Murray's 5'10", Russell Wilson's 5'10". It's not unheard of. I'll just put it to you like this. I don't think it's very likely that the Titans are going to be anything similar to what they are right now on the third day of the draft at quarterback. Because I don't think Levis is going to make it through the year. And then I think they'll either draft a young guy or they'll sign a bridge guy or they'll do both. But if we get to day 3 of the draft, and we're still looking at Will Levis and Mason Rudolph at quarterback, I will be screaming for Diego Pavia. Because Diego Pavia has got dog in him. Levis doesn't. When the going gets tough, Diego Pavia turns into a superstar. And before you tell me, well, they lost to Georgia State, go look at the second half of that game where Pavia lit it up. Pavia doesn't play defense, guys. Just like when Cincinnati lost to Washington on Monday Night Football, and people were like, and Shannon Sharp was on TV saying, Joe Burrow needs to do more. They didn't punt. What more does he need to do? Throw it to himself? So Pavia's a bad boy, and everybody knows it. So what's really the difference here? Levis is tall, like he's 6'3" or 6'4" or whatever it is. Pavia's 5'10". I'll give you that. But then, like, what else does Pavia not have? Arm strength. How important is arm strength in the NFL? The answer is not very. Have you noticed that? Again, some dudes got rocket launchers, like Josh Allen. But most guys in the NFL, Justin Herbert. But most guys in the NFL have probably average arms. Tom Brady had an average arm. Pretty good quarterback. Lamar Jackson's got an average arm. You can work around an average arm. Pavia can make throws. I know that. Again, that 4th and 1 bomb down the field into the end zone for a touchdown. Yeah, if you can throw that in college, you can throw that in the pros. So if he's 5'10", that means that he's not too short to not be able to play in the NFL. And again, I'm talking about a day 3 pick. But if the Titans are the same as what they were at quarterback, today, on the third day of the draft, I'll be yelling and screaming for Pavia. How big is Brock Purdy, by the way? Brock Purdy doesn't have a superstar arm. So Ian's on the island by himself of the people I've asked about Pavia versus Levis. I guess Joe's at the beach, so he won't be on for Jared versus Joe tomorrow, so we're going to have to find a Joe replacement. But what do we think about, as far as that Jared versus Joe scenario is concerned, what do we think about what Joe's going to say between Levis and Pavia? I think there's no doubt he's going to say Levis. Joe Rexroad says Levis. Chase says Levis. Big Joe and Derek say Pavia. Adam, I don't know. And I did text Willie about it yesterday, and I think Willie was kind of on the fence, not being able to make that pick. Oh, also, Lester texted in at the top of the hour when I asked Trevor who he would take, and Trevor said he would take Diego Pavia. And Lester says, tuning my radio channel because of a childish question that Jared thinks is so good. Vandy quarterback compared to an NFL team. That's dumb. Okay, well, 6 weeks ago, Jaden Daniels hadn't played an NFL game. So far through 6 weeks, apparently through 5 weeks, Jaden Daniels doing pretty well. So let's just keep that in mind. 615-737-1025 on our program. 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in. One texter into the text line says, Jared, I don't know if losing the locker room is the same as team morale plummeting, but I do feel like a losing streak that is not even remotely being addressed would be doing more damage to team morale and lead to situations like players wanting out of Tennessee or tying up contract negotiations. You know, another player said that players don't care about winning as much as they used to. And I think that's kind of true. Like, I hate to say it, but I'm not sure Brian Callahan would lose the team if Will Levis stays the quarterback and Will Levis keeps losing, because quite frankly, I think the Titans are kind of a group of people that don't really care about winning. And I'm not talking about the owner. I think she goes crazy when they don't win. But I'm talking about just the collection of players. Like, when's winning ever mattered to a lot of these guys? When's winning ever mattered to L'Jarius Sneed? L'Jarius Sneed's like, I want my money. I'll go to any team. Give me my money. And I don't have a problem with that. Because L'Jarius Sneed he'll meet his end of the bargain. If you pay him, he'll play. And he'll play very well. But what that means is that when you lose a bunch of games because your quarterback stinks, L'Jarius Sneed's not going to be upset about it. And that's fine. That's the society we live in now. We live in a what's in it for me and to make me society. Well, you probably should do this. Should I? Make me. Is it against the rules? No, then it's okay. Well, it's kind of a gray area and, okay, whatever. That's kind of the society we live in. And again, I mean, look at college football. We have players right now that 4 games into the season, because I think you can play 4 games and then you can redshirt. We got guys that 4 games into the year are like, see you guys, I'm out. Gonna redshirt out of here. And I'll take the rest of the year for a redshirt, hit the transfer portal, and I'll be playing somewhere else next year. Because again, winning and team and success, it just doesn't matter to people as much anymore. So I understand Derrick talking about losing the team, and maybe he's right. He'd know better than I would. But I think there's a part of it where it's like, you know what? At the same time, I'm not sure these players do care about that. I mean, the Titans signed a guy to play guard who quit the team 3 weeks into the season. PT doesn't care about that. He's doing fantasy fake. He barely even keep his job. And he's doing his fantasy football job on the side. I mean, winning doesn't matter to people as much anymore. I'm convinced of that. Maybe I'm wrong because I don't play, but it does kind of feel that way. Trent says, what happens if you put Mason Rudolph in and he gets hurt behind the terrible offensive line and then you have to put Levis right back in? Well, you have to put Levis right back in. But let me say this. If Malik Willis wins any more games for the Green Bay Packers, and I'm not sure Malik Willis will win any more games for the Green Bay Packers, but if Malik Willis wins any more games for the Green Bay Packers and you have quarterback issues, there's going to be a problem. Like, it's kind of, don't ask, don't tell. Well, Malik played well. We wished him the best, and it's good, and but I also think there's a little bit of we gave up on him, and he came in here and beat us and looked 1,000 times better than he's ever looked for us. And it's like nobody's talking about it because it's uncomfortable. But it is kind of guys, might be a problem. Vincent is up next here on our program. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for calling. Go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, Jared, we at work today, we played a little game. It was fun. It was called The Office. Y'all know we've all watched The Office, but imagine The Office and what person at the Titans organization, Carthon or Brinker, who would they be on the show? But anyway, the reason why I'm calling is the
what would you
locker
come up
room-
with?
We come up with a lot of scenarios. They were good. I won't waste your time with that. But
Well, who's
your
Michael
challenge.
Scott?
It's got to be Carthon.
Okay, and then what's
got
Brinker?
to.
Dwight?
Brinker's got to be Dwight. Yes.
Okay, but Michael was the boss of Dwight, and Brinker is the boss of Carthon.
Bingo. Now just work that through your brain. But anyway, but you add your own name to characters on the show. It was a lot of fun. But anyway, what I called for was is the losing of the locker room. I'd never understood that in the professional level. And I love Derrick. I listen to his show. He's great. But I've never understood the losing of the locker room on the professional level. You're either a bad football team or a good football team. You can have the locker room and win 2 games. At the end of the day, what's the difference? I've never understood the losing of the locker room. So I reject that, the locker room on the professional level. They're professionals. They're getting paid to do this.
You ever had a boss that you didn't believe in and you didn't think was putting you in the best scenario? And if you thought you had a better boss, things would go better? I mean, I'm sure we've all been there. Although I hate to say this, Vincent, it doesn't sound like you do a lot of work. If you guys are sitting there talking about who's who at the office and then also talking about you listen to Derrick during the middle of the day.
If I did a lot of work, could I not listen to the radio if I was working?
I guess you could.
You've got my full attention all day. So, hey, good job. Thank you.
What do you do for a living, Vincent? Oh, I was kind of wondering, it sounds kind of like Vincent doesn't do a whole lot. I mean, like, losing the locker room's real. I mean, we've all had bosses that were like, good God. We've all had that. Doesn't mean that you don't do your job. It just means that it's probably not as much buy-in when you think your boss is not getting it. But I do kind of think right now, it's more about the money than it is about the losing the team. Like, I think that the Titans kind of have a losing culture. And when you let guys like Derrick Henry, who are winners, leave, and you go out and, Snead won, but, when you've got Jeffrey Simmons as your top leader and he's the guy who's like, I'm doing my job, it's kind of like, okay, these guys really don't have the winning mindset. And when that is the case, I don't think these guys really worry about what the coach is doing or isn't doing. I mean, these are all the guys that were like, Vrabel's the best. They fired Vrabel. This guy's better than Vrabel. Okay. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. By the way, Bruce says on the text line, he says, you do the bare minimum. Texting me, or I guess he's talking about me doing the bare minimum. I sat through a 16-minute Kalen DeBoer press conference from last week just to hear whether or not on the Monday after the Georgia game, before the Vandy game, if Kalen DeBoer mentioned Vanderbilt once because somebody texted in saying he didn't. And by the way, he did not, which Nick Saban would have never, ever, ever done. But no, don't tell me that I do the bare minimum. Come on now. 615-737-1025, Stillman & Company, 1025. What else again?
Let's start with Brad, who is up or down in Florida. Hey, Brad, good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. Hey, hey, Daddy. Hey, what happened, Daddy? Because from my side, from my perspective, it looked like them intellectuals up there in Nashville that were smaller whooped y'all's ass on national TV. And Daddy, I'm just trying to understand, Daddy, because it looked bad, didn't it?
Well, I guess what you're referring to is all the Alabama fans calling in last week and saying that they were now Georgia's daddy.
That was the Paul Feinbaum show yesterday. And boy, there were more calls like it the whole day. And I got to say this. Yesterday was a fun show. Not that today wasn't a fun show. They're all fun. But it almost felt like, the feeling when you're on vacation and then it's the Sunday before you have to go back, and then you wake up on a Monday morning, you've been off for a week and a half, and it's almost like, back to work. And look, I love my job. But it was like yesterday's show was about Vandy and the upset they pulled over Alabama and how exciting that was, and the big win and everything else. And then it was like today was back to the Titans, and it was like back to the Titans, back to the Titans, and this season that I am searching for meaning in. Not sure I can get excited about losing every game, especially when there's not a high-end legit quarterback that's there on the market. But also not sure if I can get excited about the idea of Will Levis playing quarterback for the rest of the season, or the idea of switching to Mason Rudolph so they can win 6 games. Or if they win on Sunday against the Colts, which they might, they're 1-point dog, but they could absolutely win that. And then all of a sudden it's like they're back in the playoff race. Let's talk playoffs. What needs to happen? I'm not saying I'm losing the joy, but I am a little worried that this Titans season is going to be a trudge. I was told that as of today, it's going to be cold. 70s this week, I think 60s next week, something like that. It's going to be cold. It feels like that dark winter is coming. And it's the Titan season. It feels like a trudge. I hope it's not. I hope it ends up being more fun. But man, after the excitement of what happened with Vanderbilt over the weekend and the college football, getting back to reality today, it definitely felt like I was back from vacation. It was like, back to work. That's it for us. We're out of here. We've got ALCS. Is it ALCS or NLCS?
NL, I'm sorry.
NLCS baseball at 7:30 tonight. Stillman and Company. We'll see you all tomorrow, too.